What if I told you you could create this incredible form in Excel without a single line of code? Well, that's what we're about to do. Hi, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the Automated Form Creator. In this week, I'm going to show you how to create this incredible form. We're going to be able to make a single click on any database in any workbook, and within a few clicks, you're going to be able to create this incredible drag and drop form creator without a single line of code. You're going to be able to create a fully functional form. All the different field types, we're going to be able to do it in documents, pictures, and a whole lot more. I'm going to show you how to create it, of course, and I'll be taking you through every step. It's going to be an incredible training. I cannot wait, so let's get started. All right, thanks so much for joining us. I've got a really fantastic training this week. If it looks a little bit similar, last time we did create something similar in which we created a drag and drop form creator, and that we also created a brand new database along with it. But what if you have existing tables of employees or existing tables of customers? How do you convert this to a brand new drag and drop form? That is what we are going to attend today. In fact, I got some comments. Here's one from Mike on YouTube. He says, this is pretty cool. However, I think for my purposes, I prefer to be able to take an existing table of data and easily reverse engineer it into the form. In other words, I already have the data and I like to be able to create the form from the data. I know that I could do that by creating the form with all the fields and populate as we've done before many times. But I want to do that. So that's exactly when I said great idea, that's exactly what we are going to do. So what we are going to do here is simply take this table, right click it, create the form, and then it's going to decide, okay, we've got our database name, we've got our header row, we've got our first column, we've got our user ID, last column, it's automatically populated, we can change it. And then we're going to be able to decide, all right, our phone number, our start date is a date format, our credit limit's an amount, our commission is a percentage, and our contract, maybe we want to put a document on that. So I'm going to select document. So our contract, so we can upload a contract. I'm going to click OK. It's going to create a brand new page. And then what it's going to do, it's going to ask me, the commission has duplicate values. Would you like to make this field a drop-down list? Commission rate, sure, we'll do that. It also says the state has duplicate values. Would you like to make this a drop-down list? Sure, why not? And so now what we automatically create a form. All we need to do is just go ahead and bring over the button set here. And now we just bring in a search field here, drop it down right here, take a filtered list, bring it here. That's going to be our list is going to be below that, automatically default by name. Then all we need to do is just simply add the field. So we'll go ahead and put name here. We'll put in our next column, we're going to put the phone number right here. We'll put the start date in the right column. It's a little bit smaller column, so we can put it right about here. And then the email, a little bit longer field, we'll put it here. This is how easy. This is a no code. Certainly it takes code to create this, but it doesn't take any code to create the form. Of course, behind the scenes, there's lots of code. Commission, we'll drop it down here, and then we'll put the address up here. You see how easily it is to create a fully functional form. And the city, we'll drop it down here. And then lastly, we have the state and the zip code. And I'll show you how to create that form. And so we've got the contract form here. We'll put the notes last, see how easy it is to create this form. We now have a fully functional form. That's all we have to do. We double click on this and load the existing. It's going to load all the existing. There we go. Just click on the contract here. You can upload a document, right? Any type of document file. Let's say we have a PDF here. Go ahead and put that in. It's going to automatically display that PDF right here. Or we can even choose a different Word document or any type of document. Even an Excel, we can choose a preview. It's going to display that preview of Excel right there. A little bit of. So that's all we have to do. We've got a fully functional form here. We can also save and add new. And so we're going to get into all that. We can even search if we want to search by names. We can do that. Creating an automatic filter. Amazing filter. We can display the names. We can display the phone numbers or emails. Maybe we want to display the emails, or we can display it by any name. Very, very amazing form. All we needed to do was simply just create this drag and drop form. I'm going to show you how we do that. Of course, if you just want to use this just as it is, you can. I hope you like it. In fact, I've got a brand new course out. I am super excited about it. I want you to check it out. This is for freelancers, not for Excel, but for anybody that is thinking about becoming a freelancer. It is a 9-phase roadmap to financial freedom. I think you will enjoy and love so much. I've created this just for you. It is out now. I hope you'll enjoy it. It's going to help you become financially independent as a freelancer. I'm going to take you through every step of the course, and that's my brand new course. It's a 13-hour masterclass, the Freelancers Academy Masterclass, and it is a incredible course, 100 lessons. I hope you check that out. I do want you to reach your dreams. That is the best way to do that with that course. I'll include the links down below. All right, if you like this training, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button and the notification icon bell. Also comment below. I respond to each and every comment, so I do appreciate it. All right, so let's continue on with this training. How do we make this? I cannot wait. I'm going to go over every step with you. I'm going to show every line of code, everything that went into this. If you did catch our original video on this, trust me, there is a whole lot more. Everything has changed behind the scenes, so you will not want to miss a single minute of this training. I've got so much to share to you. So this is not a part 2. I know you guys don't like part 2s. You don't watch part 2s. So this is not a part 2. This is a brand new training with a whole new contrast. You saw me just build a form in a minute. You're going to be able to do that too. So if you like this, you only want to build the form, go ahead and download this. I've got that available for you. However, I'm going to show you how to do this and customize it, and I hope you'll stick with me on this training because you will learn so much about it. We've got right-click functionality, we've got filters, we've got conditional formatting, we've got everything packed into this training and drag and drop and a whole lot. So let's get started. We can start with any list and take a look at this list here, this customer list. Notice that they're different. This particular one, customer list, starts in row 3, right? We've got a header and in row 2, and we've got even another header in row 1. On our employee list, let's take a look at our employee list. I've got a list of employees here, 2 different databases. Here we have no header, right? We just no top line. We just have the header row on line 2. So notice our 2 different databases. I purposely different, so this could be any type of data. So our top header lines can be different. One is on row 1, the other is on row 2, but it still works because our application is intelligent enough to figure out what is the difference. All we need to do, again, is just right-click and select Create Form. That's where we're going to start on this training. How do we create this right-click menu option? Okay, let's get into the VBA, and I'm going to show you how we do that part and how we tie a macro to that we can automatically create this user form pop-up so we can determine this database and see how everything goes. All right, so let's get into that. Let's start with the right-click. We're going to go into the developer, and then Visual Basic. If you don't have the developer, all you need to do is just go into your options and just make sure that you've clicked on Customize this ribbon and make sure you selected developer there. Okay, once you are in the developer, all we need to do is just go into the VBA, and we're going to take a look at the workbook. Okay, let's take a look at this workbook option right here. That's what I want to show you here. Okay, once you've selected on this workbook, what we want to do is basically we want to create a button on the right-click menu. Every time we exit or deactivate the workbook, we need to remove the button. We only want this button available in this workbook. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing what we're going to do is we're going to deactivate it. When we deactivate it, it's going to remove any buttons that we've added. When we create the sheet before workbook, we're looking for sheet before right click, So that's what we want to do because that's when our button's going to appear, right? When we right click, I'm making a right click. That's when I want it to show up. So the code is going to be before right click. Here it is right here, sheet before right click, on the sheet before right click. First of all, we're going to mention the command button as a command bar button. We're creating a command bar button. If there's any issue, we're going to skip it. With the application, we're focused on the application. We need to delete, again, every time we create one, we need to delete it because it's just going to create duplicates and duplicates and duplicates unless we first delete it. So the first thing we want to do is delete anyone that might be there. If it's not there, it could create an error. Therefore, we have an on error resume next, and we have on error go to 0. Then once it's deleted, we're going to set the command button equal to the command bar cell controls. We're going to add temporarily equals true. Before 1, I want it the first spot on the menu. So before the first spot, that's where I want it to show up. And the type is going to be a control button, just a basic control button. So then we're going to focus just on that. With the control command button, we're going to create a caption for it. That caption is called create form. That's the words that appear. Then we want a face ID. Now, what is the face ID? The face ID is that little icon that shows up. Notice that little icon. How do we know which icon is that? Well, I've downloaded a list for you. I'll make sure to download it up on our Patreon. So our Patreon members will get this list. It's a little bit of a PDF. Shows you all the face IDs. I just chose one from this number. All you do is you find one and then you add that number. That number corresponds to the little icon. This is kind of old style programming, but it works just great. And so that's what's going to get us. So I found an icon that I like, and that's the one. Create form, that's the one I want. So the number that I'm using corresponds to that. This is number 9469, 9469. All right, so don't forget to join our Patreon program. I will be adding more features, fixes, or focus, and I'll make sure that you get all of the icons and everything that went into this. Then what I want to do is I want to create a macro that means on action. When I click the button, what happens? I want to run this macro called create form. That's the macro that I wanted. So that's it. That's pretty much all we need to do that. So we're going to delete it. Make sure when we deactivate the workbook, we're deleting it. And then before right click, it gets recreated each time we right click. Okay. Very, very good. So how do we now? So let's go, we're going to go to create the form. I want to create this form and run the macro that's going to do that. So that's the first macro that we're going to go into. If we take a look inside our user form field setup, that's what I want to focus on. User form field setup. This is a module called user form field. Notice that the first macro is called create form. This is what we want to do. And what is that macro going to do? What that macro is going to do, basically, it's going to look through all the data. It's going to try to determine what row the header is on. It's going to determine the last column if possible, and it's going to determine also when our first column, our unique ID, what is the unique ID, the unique column, it's column 1 in this case. And then also what it's going to do is also going to try to determine, we get to know that this is an amount, this is a percentage, and then this might be a backslash or if there's a value in it. So notice on our, let's say on our employees, right? It's going to find a backslash, so it knows it's going to be a picture. So it's going to try to figure out what format or what's going to go in that cell. And what it's also going to do is if it sees multiple, let's say we have multiple issues here, multiple cities here, or multiple states, it's going to determine, hey, I see that there's multiples in here. Do you want to make this one a drop-down list? So it's going to take a look at all the data, and it's going to determine which ones might be a drop-down list, and it's going to give you that option. So that's what we're going to do inside this macro. So the first thing what we want to do is determine the name of the database. I'm going to default that name to the name of this sheet. This is called customers, and this is called employees. So that's going to be our default name for the database, and the user can change it. I want to know the column type. What is the type of column? Remember, is it going to be a amount? Is it going to be a percentage? Is it going to be perhaps a date or some other type of field? Now we do have those types of fields inside our admin. Here in admin, we've got text, date, amount, number, percentage, picture, and document. So all of these are called field types. So this could be one of those. We've set some different formats for it, date format, amount format, and number format, and now we've added a percentage format. So we can use all those formats. So we just need to determine which one is which. So as we go into our database and we go back into our code, so that's why we need the column type. Field format, what is the format of that field? So what I'm going to do is if the format is percentage, I'm going to make that column type percentage. I also want to know the field type. What is the type of that field? Also a string. I need to know the database row. As we move through that, I need to know what database column, the header row. Certainly we need to know what the header row is. Where's that? What is the first column? What is the last column? And the column counts. How many columns are there? So those are long variables. I also want to know the top position and the left position that double. This is used for the form fields, or it could be. And I don't think we're going to use X and Y positions in this. And I also need to create that form. I want to create that user form. So I need to create it dynamically. So we're going to create some text boxes inside the form. We're going to create some labels inside the form. We're not creating images, so we probably don't need that. And we are going to create some list boxes, so we do need that. And some combo boxes list boxes we won't be using on this, sorry. Some additional code, but if you wanted to, just create that. Combo boxes, or we do need to create those. Okay, well, let's just take another quick look at it, right? When we right click and create that form, we need some labels. We need some text boxes. We need some combo boxes because I need to be able to, I want the end user to assign, is this field a date? Now we try to get it right. VBA is going to figure it out pretty good. I mean, they know that started. But in case that VBA didn't get it right, you can also assign it here and it's automatically going to assign it. So that's kind of cool, right? It automatically determines if it is. So, all right, great. So we've got that. And also we need to know the header row, the first column. So we need all those variables inside that. So to do that, so then what we're going to do is we're going to dimension the control as a control. We're going to focus on that active sheet. First, I want to know what the database name is. Well, that's simply the sheet name, the active sheet name. Again, that's what's here, the tab here, customers or employees down here. So that's all it is. You're going to put that into a string variable called db name. If for some reason the DB name is admin, certainly we cannot, right? If we're trying to right click an admin. Now, there are ways to limit this right click only on the databases, but we're not really sure, right? I'm going to leave it open to you as a developer. So obviously, if we try to create a form from an admin screen, I want this message to say, please run this in a I spelled that wrong, a database or table sheet. Okay, so we want to make sure that we run it inside a database or table sheet. So keep that in mind. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to check if for some reason the database, I want to check the name. If I try to run this on one of our forms, here's a form sheet, a form template. Here's our template. Here's our employee form, and here's our customer form. So let's say I try to create the form. Again, I want that message to say, please run this in a database or table sheet. I spelled that one doubly wrong here. Forgot the T here and the A here. So that's what I have you here for, to help me and show me. Okay, so basically, if the name of the sheet contains form, we know it's not. Now, I guess if your database has the word form in it, then it's probably not a good. So, but the idea is that if the name of the sheet contains the word form, it's probably a form and it's probably not a database. So we're just preventing these things from happening on a database. Okay, great. So once we know that we're on a database, there are other ways to secure it, other ways to know that it's a database, but for our purposes, that is sufficient. I want to determine the last column. I must know the last column of that database. And so to do that, we're going to use a little bit of a formula. We are going to use the active sheet range. We'll just do A through Z, and I only want to do the first 5 rows. All right? I only want to focus on the first 5 rows because that's generally going to be the data. I'm going to look for any value, and I want the search order by columns. I'm looking in columns. I want to know the last column, not the row. The search direction is previous, so from 5 all the way on up, and I want to determine the last. I want to know what the last column is, what the column that has the data. So in this case, right, because the word contract is right here in M, this is going to be our last column. So we know that our last column is column 13. That's going to put that number 13 in this variable right here. The first column is 1. We can set this as a default column just to 1. Now, there are ways to check if your first column is blank, but hopefully you're using data where the first column is not. So we'll set it to default. There are other ways to check. If you've got a blank column, it probably wouldn't be good. So you really want to have your data at least on the first column. I want to determine the header row. How do I know what row is the header? Well, generally the header row is going to have a value in every single field. So I want to know the first, from all the way to the top down to the bottom, from the first row down, what is the first row that contains a value in every single cell from 1 to the last column. So we're going to run a little bit of a loop. From the database row equals 1 to 5. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to count all of the values in that row, starting with column 1, going to the last column. If it's greater than the column count, then the header row equals the database row. And then we're just going to say the column count equals the application count A. So basically what we're doing is I'm counting all the cells. And I know that this one contains data. So if this is the first one that contains 13 values, we're going to go always with the first one. Because it has to be greater, right? So the first one with the highest number is going to win. The first one. So even if they all contain 13 values, a value in every single column for that specific row, we're going with the first one. So we're looking for anything that's greater. So if you see here, it says greater than the column count. So that's basically all we're going to do. We're going to determine the most fields within the range. We're going to check the first 5 rows. That's going to tell us, at least it's going to try to figure out the header row. It's not an absolute, because certainly the user has the ability to make that change. When we right click any cell and we create the form, we can change the header row. We can set it to any row we want, but at least VBA is going to have a really good attempt at trying to figure out exactly what that header row is. In case it gets it wrong, we can always change it from here. Okay, so once we've determined the header row and we know it, then what we want to do is I want to set the initial left and top positions. That's going to be for our form. And then what we're going to do is we are going to set the form setup for each control in controls. This is our form, right? We're focused on form setup. If we take a look at this user form right here, this is our basic user form. It contains all the basic fields, but none of our header field names and field types, because those are generated by VBA. But it does contain our constants, our database name, our header row, our first column, our unique ID, and our last column. So let's take a look at this. If we look in the properties, we see this called database name. We see this is called header row, self-explanatory, first column, unique ID column, and last column. So then all we have is just simply the OK and the cancel button. Cancel button will just close without doing anything. OK will run a macro, which we'll go over. So what I want VBA to do is I want VBA to create a text box for every, a label for every single header, a text box for every field name, and a field type, a combo box for all the field types. Remember, the field types are coming directly from here. Here's our field types. We have a named range called field type. So that combo box is going to contain all of these values. All right, so that's exactly what VBA is going to do when we right click on here. So that's we're going to create this form. So this form is called form setup. So that's the one we're focused on right here, form setup. So now what I want to do is for each control in all the controls, so for all of the ones in the form, the first thing what I want to do is I want to make sure that any of our labels, any of our fields that are marked label, any of our fields that are marked text, or any fields that are marked combo box, I want to delete them. If it's greater, in other words, we're basically going to recreate this form automatically each and every time. So if there's any fields here already, I want them removed. I want a nice clean slate, a nice clean area to start on. So we're going to check. So how do we check to make sure that they're all removed? Well, what I'm going to do is for every control, I'm going to look at the name of the control. If it contains the string label, it's greater than 0, meaning it's found. We're looking in the name and using instring. If the word label is found, we're going to remove it. We're going to delete that. Then we're going to look for those that contain the word text. Going to remove those, and anything that removes combo box, we're going to remove those. So basically, this line of code right here, all that does is it cleans up that user format and removes anything old so that we have a nice blank clean slate to start on. Okay, next up, what I want to do is I want to set the field name. Now our database name inside our user form, this is called database name. So if I want to take this value and I want to put the name of the database inside this field, it's called database name. As we see over here, we can expand this a little bit here. We see that's database name. So I want to fill that value with the actual name. Now, since we've already put that database name inside a variable called DB name, all we need to do is just add it to that. That's going to add it to that field inside that user box. I also want to take the other ones, the header row is going to go inside the head of the field inside the header row, right? So basically all we're going to do is populate these fields. These 4 fields, or 5 total, we're going to populate. That's exactly what we're going to do next. In the next line of code, we're simply populating all these fields. So the header row is going to take on the header row. The first column is going to take on the first. The unique ID is going to take on that first column. I'm setting that to the first column, set default. But that can be changed. Right? We're changing it, but the user can, of course, change that inside the user form. And I want to set the last column to the last column. So basically all of these 5 fields get populated on the top. Okay, the next part is I want to then create that user form. But if we notice that user form, I want to create it dynamically. Let's take a look. We've got about 13 fields here. So when I create that form, notice we've got quite a long user form here. However, if I go into the employees, a few less fields, if I right click on here, we have a little bit slightly less, right? So that user form, the height of that user form has to be dynamic, and it's got to be based on the number of columns. So I figured I'd do a little bit of math to determine that. So the height of the user form we're going to set up right now. So the height is here. It's going to equal 33. That's just some number that I figured out that worked well, times the last column. So basically we're adding 33 pixels times the number of columns, 33 times the number of columns, plus 185. Now 185 is for the first part, right? So we need a certain amount of space at the top. So this top part is covered 185. So basically it's going to increase based on the number of columns in our database. So it's going to increase that. Okay, great. So once we've used that height, that's going to set the proper height of that user form based on the number of columns in the database. Now we're going to loop through our database. I'm going to loop through the columns from the first column to the last column. And database is the value, database column. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I want to determine the format, right? So the field format is based on the active sheet, the header row plus 1. So what I'm going to do is the header row. Here's the header row. Here's plus 1. So I know that if I take a look at this, it's probably going to be amount. If I look inside, I see that this is an accounting. Okay, so I've found a $sign in there, so I know it's probably an amount. If I take a look at this here, I see that this is the date. If I go into the more number formats and I take a look at this date here in this custom format, I see it's M/D/YYY. So I know that this is a date. So there's certain characteristics that we can look. Sometimes we can look at the format of the cell, or sometimes that we can look at the data. If we look at the data here, this cell format is not going to help us, right? It's just general format. However, if I look at the data, I see that there's a backslash on here. Maybe it's a picture, maybe it's a document. I can also probably check for the extension JPEG, PNG, so that's a little more code, but I could probably do that to know that it's a picture. So I can also look at the data. If there's data here, that might help me as well. It might help me determine that this is a picture field. So that's going to help us. So we're going to determine that field format is going to be base. So what I want to do is I want to extract the format of this cell. I want to know what the format of, that means the header row plus 1 row down. What is the format there? I'm going to put that into a variable called field format. So I'm going to get that, the header row plus 1 plus the database column, I want to extract that number format, whatever that format is, and I want to put it into this variable called field format. Now, if the field format is general, then the field type is text. I considered using the case here, but this kind of worked much better. I was going to use select case, but this actually worked a lot better. So if the in-string field format, so here now what we're doing is we're checking that format, and inside that format, I'm going to look for an M. You notice if there's an M, that probably means month, and if there's an M inside that format, we're going to set it to a date. So the field type is date. However, if the field format contains 0 or 0.0 or 0.00 is probably a number, probably most likely. So if the format's 0, so that's how we can do it. Then we know it's a number field. If it contains a $sign, the field format contains a $sign. We're going to look inside that string. That's probably an amount. So we're going to set that field type to amount. If it contains a percentage, we're going to set it to percentage. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to base it not on the field format, but I want to base it on the data itself. Maybe if there's data in there, we can look. So active sheets header row +1. I want to look at the value, the actual value of the data here. So when I look at that value, is there a backslash that's found in there? If it is, means greater than 0, then the field type we're going to set to picture. It could be document. We don't know. It could be picture or document, but at least it's a way. They can change it through the drop-down list pretty easily, but we can know we'll set it to picture. Okay, if the field type is at empty for any reason, then we're just going to set it to text. Okay, great. So that's how we set all the field types. So now we're ready to start adding our field labels. If we remember in our drop-down list, right, we need to create a user form. I need to first create the label. I'm going to default that label to whatever's in the header. Then I'm going to let the user change. Maybe they want the field name different. Maybe they want it different, so we're going to do that. And maybe we want the employee name, text. So we're going to create all of these, a little bit different. I want the employee name. Maybe you want to call it just employee or name or something. Maybe you don't want. So you can change that value or start date. So it gives the user the ability to make changes to that, but we're going to leave it just as it is. And we can also, of course, change the format. Maybe we want ID to a number field or something like that. We probably don't need ID in here. We can probably escape out of that. I think that because ID is we're not going to change it. So I could probably start from column 2. But I left column 1 in here in case you want to make changes. So I give you that flexibility, but we're probably not going to use that because that is our unique ID. Okay, so what we're going to do is first create those labels. So we're going to set the label field. Controls, we're going to create a brand new label for that. We can do this using the controls because we're still inside, we're still in with form setup. So using controls, we're going to add a brand new control. What type of control? We're going to add a label. That's the type of control we're adding. We're going to give it a name. We're going to call it, but I want a unique name for that label. So I'm going to label and the database column because we're looping through the database columns. So we know that every label is going to have a unique ID based on this name and the database column. And now what we're going to do is we're going to then focus on that. We're going to set that top position to the top position, the width at 120, the font size at 12, and the left position based on the left position. Then the back style, I'm going to give it a transparent back style because I just a label. And then in caption, we're going to give it a caption. What do we want? We want whatever's in the header row and the database column. This is that header label. So basically, it's going to take whatever that header row is. It's going to start adding whatever's here to our user form labels. Okay, we've created the labels. Now we're ready to create the text field. So now what we're going to do is we're going to set the text field. Remember, this text field we've already created all up here. Text field as a text box, MS Forms label as a label, and then combo box as a combo box. So we've already set that up here. So with those text fields, we're going to do controls add. We're going to add a text box this time, and we're going to call it text and the database column, giving it also a unique name based on the database column. With the text field, we're going to set that value. What is the value of it? It's going to be that, again, the header row. We're going to default it to that same header row name. User can change it. Top position is true, right? Everything's the word wrap true. Multi-line in case we want it. The height, we can set that. I think it's we're using the default height, so we don't really need to set it. I want to set based on the left position, but I want to move it 90 pixels over to the right, 90 pixels over. So it's going to be the left position plus 90. We're going to give it a very specific width, add 100 pixels, and a font size of 12. That's it for the text. Now we're ready for the combo box, okay? So the combo box in our third column, I'm going to set that combo box. We're adding a combo box control to our forms. Okay, so we're going to say combo box, and again, we're giving it a unique name called combo box along with the database column. You can start to get the idea here. So with the combo box, we're going to set that value of the combo box based on the field type. Remember, that's the field types that we set up here based on the text, date, number, amount, percentage, or picture. here. So that's going to get set up in here inside this value right here. This value right here, field type. The row source, remember, it's a drop-down list. So what is the row source? It's based on the field type, right? We're adding field type to the row source. That is the same named range. Remember, row source has to be a named range, and it's the same named range that we have here in the admin, field type. So that's what we're going to add it in. We're giving it that same top position as everything else, but this time the left position is going to be moved more over to the right, so we're adding 210 pixels. The width is going to be set to 80, the font size is 12. Then what we're going to do is we've done the first row. I want to increment the top position as we move down, so we're going to take whatever that top position and we're going to add 30 to that. And simply that is we're going to add, the reason we do that is so that when we create that user form, we have space between those. So our first one gets the top position, we're moving down 30, the next one and the next one. So we just loop through all the columns, incrementing 30 each and every time. All right, so that's it. So then all we do is we set, once we're done, we're going to set the top position of that OK button. That OK button, that's the name of that OK button. If we look in, let's pull that user form up. If you take a look in here and into the properties here, pulling in the properties, we see it's called OK button. And here in the cancel, I know it's small font here, cancel button. So those are the names. So what I want to do is I just want to set the default height of this because we don't know. So we're setting that default height based on the height of the top position. So the top position is going to set that OK. Cancel is going to set that OK. And then the last thing was what we're going to do is we're going to show that form. So it's going to display that form. Great. So that's how we create this form. So that's all we did is click create form. And that creates this form. What happens next? Well, next what I want to do is I want to create a brand new form based on all these fields. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing what we do is let's cancel out of that for now. I've got a form template. This is basically a blank template that gets automatically created for every single form it creates. So it's going to take this sheet, it's going to duplicate this sheet, and then what it's going to do is it's going to create a set of fields based on that, and it's going to put them right here. So the first thing we want to do is duplicate this sheet. All right, so continuing on let's do that, go through the sample, see how that gets done. So we create that, that's fine, I like that. We'll set that to document. Then we're going to click OK. What that's going to do is it's going to delete any customer form that might be there. It's going to ask me again, the commission is a duplicate. Would you like to? We'll say no for this. We'll say yes for the state, and then we're good to go. Okay, so that's where we are. So it duplicated it. It added a title here. It created a button set, which is already on the duplicate. The search field and the filtered list, those already come from the template. You see those three. And then what it did is it automatically created these fields, these shapes, all based on the fields inside our user form. So for every one of these, you create a state. Now, if we take a look inside our form template, we also see somewhere around here, here we are, this sample field. So this sample field is what's going to get duplicated. So once the sheet gets duplicated, we're then going to take this little sample field that's way over here, and we're going to duplicate that, and we're going to create those particular fields here automatically. Okay, so that's exactly what we're going to be doing inside that. So that's inside VBA. So how do we do that? Well, that's called the sheet form setup macro. So here, when we click OK, let's just go ahead and go into the form setup right here. I'm going to go into the code of that. So when I press OK, what macro runs? This one called setup form sheet. When I press cancel, the form is hidden, and we're going to clear out the form. So that's the only thing we have the code behind this, right? So there's just two things. The cancel button, we're hiding the form, and we're unloading all the details. So basically, we're just going to clear it all out, reverting it back to the original form. So this clears everything out. So it unloads the form. This macro is going to run automatically when we press OK. So if we click on here, the definition is going to take us directly to the sheet form macros. It's going to take us to the top, and we see the setup sheet form. So this is what's going to happen. We've got some variable names, the database name, some very familiar, the column type, the field format, the field type, we need to know that, the unique ID name, I want to know the name of the ID, the database row, the database column, the header row, first column, last column, list number, we'll go through that, column number, last row, column count, unique ID column, I need to know the list column. We'll go through these one by one, the last results row, so all these long variables. I need to know the list name as a list and the form sheet as a worksheet, right? So I want to set that sheet that we created. Okay, so the first thing what I want to do is I want to make sure that the user has entered all the correct values. If something's missing in that user form, we need to let the user know. So if the database name, so we're focused on that form, that particular form, we haven't closed it yet, all we're doing is simply checking the values inside the form. So the first value, that database name, that field, I want to make sure that that's not blank. If it is, or if the first column is less than 0, or if the header row is less than 0, less than or equal to 0, I guess I should put. Less than or equal to 0, certainly wouldn't want that. And then, or also if our last column is less than or equal to 0, maybe it's blank, so we want to check on that. Or the unique ID column is less than or equal. If any of those things are less than or equal, the user hasn't entered that, then I want to make sure to let the user know. Please make sure the database name, first column, header row, last column, unique ID are all filled out properly. If the user has not filled any of these out, we're going to exit sub without doing anything. If all those fields are not blank and they have been filled out correctly, we're going to set that database name. Oh, there was one other small thing I didn't show you, but it was kind of small. So in the admin screen, I've created a number of rows here. Basically, we're calling this row column number. So these are just numbers. And inside the form, inside that user form, I set that up. So that was this form right here. So inside this here, all we did is just set that up to create numbers. That way the user will actually be able to do that. So if we look at the row source inside here, we see that it's called row column number. I know it's very small font here. Row column number. So that's the same combo box data validation that I use for each one of these. So that was the only thing that I wanted to show you. Okay, great. So we're setting the database name. Now we're taking the values out of our form and we're putting them into variables. So we're doing the opposite. We're taking the first column, we're putting it into this long variable. We're taking the last column, and last we're taking the header row and the unique. We're putting them all into variables. Then what we're going to do is we're going to hide the form. I've got everything that I want from the form here. We're just going to hide the form, but I'm not unloading the form yet. I'm not clearing the form out. That comes a little bit later on, but I just want to hide it, right? We don't want to see it on the screen. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to create that form sheet. I want to take this form template here, this template we have, and I want to duplicate it, and I want to create a very unique name. Now, the name of it is going to be called based on the database. I want to call the database name and an underscore and then form. Database name underscore and form. So I'm creating a name for that. So that's exactly what we're going to do right now. So we're going to turn off application display alerts false, right? But if that sheet is already there, if the sheet already exists, we need to delete it. If we're deleting it, it's going to give us a warning saying, are you sure you want to delete the sheet? In this case, I do not want any warning. Therefore, I'm turning off application display alerts. We're turning it off, and then we're going to turn it back on once we're done right here. So we're going to delete that sheet. That means if it exists, we're deleting it. If there's an error, it doesn't exist, we can use on error resume next and on error go to 0. That way we won't get any errors in case that sheet doesn't exist. Okay, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to take that form template, that sheet that we create, I want to copy that. And where do I want to put it? I want to put it directly before the current database sheet. So that means if I create a brand new customer form, I want it right before the sheet. If I create a brand new employee, I've already moved it over, but I want it right before the sheet. So that's where I would want to place it, right before the database sheet. So that's what we're going to set before the name. Then I want to give it a very specific name, that active sheet name. Once we copy it, it becomes that brand new sheet becomes the active sheet, automatically becomes. So we're going to set a name to that. We're going to be based on the database name underscore and form. That's going to set the name for the new worksheet, set name for a new form sheet. Okay, so now that we have that, what I want to do is I want to set it as the form sheet. Form sheet, we've already defined it as a worksheet up here. So we can set the form sheet equal to this workbook, sheets, database name, the same. So that's going to basically allow us to work with it. We can use active sheet or we can use form sheet. We'll use form sheet. Okay, so now form sheet, I want to set that database name, that brand new form, right? If we take a look inside here, customer or employees, either one, and I'm going to unhide, right click, and I'm going to unhide columns A and B. We've got some. So the first thing what I want to do inside B2 is I want to put that database name. Notice customers is here. So we're going to take that database name. I'm putting it directly inside B2. Okay, continuing on. Once it's in B2, we're going to set that database name. We're going to focus on the database, right? I want to focus on the database. I want to clear any previous list. We're going to run some filters on the database. And so because when we run a filter, right, let's pull up our completed form for our employee form here, right? So if I want to create a search field, I need to create some, like if I want to search for an employee name, right? Let's say Fred, and I want to search for Fred, and I notice that Fred's the only one here. I want to create some search fields. So I want some advanced filters inside our employee database here. So to do that, but in case there's any previously, I want to clear it all out. So notice Fred here, our results here. So our particular criteria is here. And then I want to create our results. So I want to clear these results. Anything that might be here before, I want to clear it out. So we're going to do that BA1 through BZ. We're going to clear out. So if we take a look in here, here's our list. So these are lists. Okay, this is what I want to show you. These are lists. Now, when I create a list, notice that we have unique lists. We have, remember we wanted to create some unique lists for the cities or the states. We have drop-down lists for that. So if we take a look inside the employee form and we take a look inside the city, we see that that's a drop-down list of cities we've created. So what we need is a unique list. So basically, every time we create a brand new form, I want to make sure that all the list is cleared out because we're creating brand new lists. We're going to create brand new lists. And the states also have a drop-down list. So that comes directly from here. It comes from here and it comes from here. So what we want to do is I want to make sure we clear them out. So I'm going to clear, and the employee number, the shift number, we also did too, right? If we take a look in here, shift number, we created a drop-down list. There's really 3 drop-down lists that we created for the employee: the shift number, the state, and the city. So those 3 are going to be located here. Always starting in BA, because I just put it far away. BA is here, here, and here. So I'm going to take all this and I just want to clear it all out. So that's what we're going to do in here. So BA, so this is with the database, whatever database that user selected, BA1 through BZ, we're clearing any previous list data, clearing it all out. Now what I want to do is I want to check, are there any lists that we need to work with? But first thing I want to do is delete any list names. Now we're going to give our list names very specific. They're always going to be based on the database name and the word list. Okay, so any list that we create, if we take a look, let's take a look at some of the lists that we created so we can see what they are. So inside the formulas and name manager, and we just looked at employees. So we see employees. I need to delete some of these error ones. I'll clear that out. So if we take a look inside here, we see that we have employee list 4, 7, and 8. Employee list 4, 7, 8. We have 3 different ones. If we tab over, we see that 4, this is based on the column. What is 4? Why 4? It's based on the column, the database column. How do I know that? Because it's for column 4. Okay, so I'll show you how that, but that's what that 4 is. It's for the column. So we see we have 3 different lists. Let's go back in there real quick. Name manager, we have 4, employee list 4. We have 7 based on the column. And we have 1 for employees. So we have 3 different lists for employees. What I want to do is I want to delete any of these that might exist. We're deleting them, right, in case they exist. So to do that, I'm going to run through all the names. Anything that says employee list contains the word employee list, regardless of the number, we are going to delete. So to do that, we're going to focus on for each list name. Now, list name is a name up here. List name, it's already as a name. So we're going to go through all of the names here. But I'm going to look if the name of the list contains the database name, in this case is employees, and the word list. If it's greater than 0, that means that list, I want to delete it, right? Before we create any new names, I want to make sure the old ones are deleted. Otherwise, they get duplicated over and over again. Great. So once we have that, now what I want to do is I want to figure out what are the unique values of that. So what I want to do is I want to try to figure out which items in our database, by looking at our database, I want to see which items the user might want as a drop-down list, right? Why would it shift? Because if you see, there's a lot of duplicates in here. If you look in the state, we see some duplicates in here. And the city, there's some duplicates also. Notice there's Racine here. There, so there's some duplicates here. So what I want to do is if there's some duplicates found, then I want to give the user the opportunity to say, hey, there's duplicates in this column. Would you like to create a drop-down list of this so to make it easier? That's exactly what we're going to do. But how do we know if there's duplicates? Well, what we can do is we can determine the last row here. If I count, I know there's 20 items in here, but if I create a unique list of this and I put that unique list is going to be less. How do I know that? Well, let's take a quick look. So if I go here and I go into, let's say here, formulas, right? And we want to create, data, and we create an advanced filter based on this. So I'm going to click on advanced, and I want to create a copy to another location, and I want unique records only, and there's no criteria. So we're going to clear out that criteria, and I want that unique list. Let's say we're just going to appear it right here in U. So I click OK. Okay, so what that's going to do, let's put the name up here first. We need to put that employee name. That's important. The city, let's just go with the city. So what I'm going to do, we're going to do this in VBA. So we're going to create that advanced, let's go back into the advanced formula, and we're going to take a quick look at it. So advanced, right, just where we were. And then what we're going to do is we're going to copy it to another location, and we'll create right here, this city. I like this right here. Okay, so now when we create that, you're going to see that the list. So now if we take a look at this, we see that there's 18 items here. 18 items in this list. But our original list on city had 20 items. So we notice that our unique list is less than our original, and that means we have duplicates. So we know that if our original data is greater than our unique names list, then there's a good chance that they may want to have that as a drop-down list. So in that case, I've decided to give the user the ability to say, hey, this is a drop-down list. So that's exactly what we're going to do now inside VBA. So we're going to determine the last row of data. This is going to give us the last row of data. And I want to create a unique ID and names based on the ranges. What is that unique ID? So the unique ID name is going to be, we're going to use the replace here. How do we create that? Because that unique ID name is very, very important because we're going to need to create a named range based on that. So the first thing what I want to do is create a unique ID based on this. I'm going to base it on that first column. But any unique ID, we certainly can't have spaces in there. So if I want to create a unique ID called employee ID, if I go into the formula name manager and I see employee ID here, you see this is the named range for that. But what I want to do is I want to use that unique column, whatever the user said is their unique ID column, I want to create a named range based on that. But I know that the name that must not contain spaces. So that means if the header, like it does here, contains a space between employee ID, I need to replace that space with an underscore. So that's what we're going to do in this line of code right here. We're going to use the replace. We're going to look for any spaces. But what are we replacing? We're going to use the unique ID column. Remember, the user specified what that column is based on the header row. And what is the value? So if there's any spaces that are found, I'm going to replace them with the underscore. So this is going to create a name for the unique ID. We need to create a named range. VBA is going to create this named range. You saw that named range that we had here for the employee ID. VBA is going to create that. We're going to create this formula. We're going to do it in VBA. And that's very important. So we have that unique ID for those employees, for whatever data set we have. So for example, if it's customers here, we're going to say customer, notice it's customer ID. I'm going to create a unique ID and I'm going to change that space to an underscore. Same idea, regardless of the database, because I want that unique ID to make sure it doesn't have any spaces. Okay, continuing on. Now what we want to do is I want to take this workbook. I want to take that name, that brand new name. I want to create a named range on that, but I can't do it if there's already a named range with that same name. So we're going to delete that. And I also want to delete any names with the fields. What does this mean? So we're going to wrap it in on air resume next and on air go to 0. And that's because if these names don't exist, it will create an error. I want to delete two things. I want to delete that unique ID, and I also want to delete something called fields with the database name. What is that? Let's take a look inside our formulas, name manager, and we're going to look for employee fields. Taking a look down here, looking for employee fields. This is the one that I want. This is the one I want to create. I want to create basically a named range for all the headers. So when we tab over here, we see that our dancing ants surround our headers. So basically, I want to create a named range for all of our header values. Why is that important? That is important because if you take a look inside our search by, we have a search by. We need to have this data validation list here inside both of these for the results, because maybe we want to search by a certain limb, or we want to search by here or display by. So both of those use the same data validation. Take a look in data validation here for either one of those. We're going to see that's the employee field. So those are important. Let's clear that name out, and that's going to load all this. We might want to display. I don't know why we'd want to display by something others, but we can display by anything. So we want to have those. So I need to create those. So before we create them, we need to make sure that they're both deleted. So we're going to delete both of those names before we recreate them. So the first thing what we want to do is we want to then add them. So we're going to focus on this workbook, names. We're going to add a name. I want to add that unique ID, right? So that unique ID named range called unique ID. This is the name we've given it to them. Remember, we've removed the spaces. And what does it refer to? I want to create the formula that it's going to refer to. We're going to use the offset formula. Now, of course, we've done this many, many times inside our formulas, inside our name manager, but this time we're doing it through VBA. So we're going to use the quotation marks, parentheses here, quotation marks here. And then what I want to do is I want to add the database name, and I want to add the and sign. Then we need another parentheses. We also need to make sure that we're adding the apostrophe before and after, just in case there's spaces in the name. So before and after the database name, the apostrophe, quotation mark, the exclamation point, another quotation mark, and then what do I want to focus on? I want that what is the first part? That first part is going to be based on that header row and unique ID and the address. So the address of that header row. Then we want a comma, and then we want to subtract 1. Why do we want to subtract 1? Because I want to start in one row below the header. We're counting one row below the header. We are including the header in case there's no data at all. So that's important. Then we're going to skip. There's no columns above or beyond, right? Above or below. Then what we're going to do is we're going to count. I want to count all the names. Counting, use the counting. We're going to base it on that database name. And then the cells. What's the first range? It's going to be that header row. That's our first cell in the range. We're using range. The first cell is that cell, the header row. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go all the way through a large row and then that unique database column in the address. Now, because we're using the header row to count, I need to subtract 1. So we're going to subtract 1. And then we're going to use a single column. That's 1. So that's going to create that formula for our named range. So what exactly does that formula create? If we take a look inside the formulas, once again, name manager, back to employee ID, it created this exact formula. So this is the exact formula that we just created inside VBA. Next up, I want to create one for the fields. We saw how important that was. It's going to be all the header rows. Using this workbook, database name, we're making it unique. We always include the database name. And why is that important? Because if we have multiple databases, we're going to be creating multiple named ranges. We're going to be creating one for employees, one for customers, or whatever you have. So we always want to make sure to include that database because it's unique along with the fields. And this one refers to the database name. Again, using the same equals, quotation marks, apostrophe, and then apostrophe, quotation marks, exclamation point. Then, of course, the cells, that first column in that header row, all the way through the last column in that header row. And we want the address of that. So what that's going to do is going to create that named range for all the headers. We're going to use that in our drop-down list. Okay, so now both of them got created. So what else do we want to do? With the brand new sheet, I want to put this title. I want to put our database name here along with a space and a form, and I'm going to put it in D1. If we take a look at our form template, we just says it's the name of the training, automated form creator, or whatever I change it to, something like that. So, but I want to replace this with whatever it was actually, so that way our customer form gets customers form and our employee forms get employees forms. So we need to add that into D2. So that's just, D1. So D1 is going to take on, I want the uppercase, so we're going to use the uppercase, the database name, a space, and the word form. So that's going to add that title of the form. Next up, what I want to do is add some formulas. If we take a look inside here, inside our, let's say our employees form here, because our employee form is complete, I'm going to unhide this. We take a look, I need some formulas here. If we take a look inside B6, I want to determine what, if I put the employee ID 1 or 2, notice that the employee, this is the record ID or employee ID. So the employee ID is 4. I want to know what row that person is on. What row are they on? If I take a look inside the employees and I see Mary Smith, her ID is 4, she's on row 5. If I take a look inside Mary Smith, you see her ID is 4, she's on row 5. So what I want to do is I want to extract the row from Mary Smith. If I know her employee ID is 4, I want to extract the row. Notice that the first row is occupied by a header, so we're going to start one row down. So we need to make sure we add 1 in this case because we know the header row is on row 1. So what I want to do is I want to create a unique formula for this. So this particular formula gets created in VBA. Why is that important? Because this formula includes that brand new employee ID named range that we just created. So that's very important. That's why this formula gets created in VBA. Now we could have it. Now in our form template, I think I may have included let's go ahead and unhide this, but it's useless, right? Because we don't know the name of the database range. So no, I didn't put anything in, which is good. So notice in our template, there's no formula here because that formula is automatically created in VBA. Because it's important, it's got to include that database name. Very, very important to include the database name. So if error match B5, we're matching whatever is located in the record ID, which is that employee ID in this case. We're looking at the employee IDs. I want an exact match. We're moving one row down. But if we take a look at our customer form here, let's look in B6. We're adding 2 rows down. Well, that's interesting, right? Why is that important? Because inside our customer database, it starts on the 3rd row. Our employee database starts on the 2nd row. So we need to add different. So it's going to be based on that. So making sure that our formula adds a variable based on where the header row is. Okay, so we're going to add that formula. We're adding it in B6. That formula is going to go if error match B5. That's going to say the unique ID name, right? We want an exact match, 0. Plus, I want to add in the header row. If the header row is on row 2, we're adding the header row. If the header row is on row 1, we're adding the header row. So plus 1. And then quotation marks, which is same as character 34 in VBA. When you need to add quotation marks inside the formula, you need to use character 34, right? Because quotation marks are recognized in VBA, so we can't use that. So we can use character 34 and character 34. So basically this right here is simply just double quotes and then the end of the parentheses. Okay, great. So that adds our matching, and that's going to determine what row we have for our record. Very, very important. But what about the next record ID? The next record ID is similar. We're going to use the employee ID. I need to determine the next record ID using the max formula. If we take a look inside our employees, we've got 20 employees here, right? We want to make sure that the next one's going to be 21. So to do that, we need to use the max plus 1. So we can add that formula also in VBA. Inside B7, we're going to use if error max and the unique ID and plus 1 plus 1. So we're simply adding the max formula here to get our next, let's say, record ID, because we don't know if it's employee, record ID formula. And this is our record, I will call it record database row. Okay, so we have those formulas in here. All right, next up, what else do I need? I want to add another formula in here. I need another formula right inside here, filter column. If we take a look in the filter column, inside our VBA, when we get to it, we're going to know that our filters start on row E8. So if I know our filters start on row E8, I want to know what is the selected column. What column is this? So that's very important. What I mean by that, when the user uses the filter, I need to know what row it's on. So if I take a look at start date, notice this changes to 3. So I want those results. I need to know what column to display. Are we displaying names? Are we displaying the cities? What column are we displaying? So I need to know what row, what column displayed. So to get that, we're going to use a formula. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look up E8, and I'm going to determine, okay, it's found email is in E8. So if I look at email and I match that in the fields, right, it's going to determine what column it is. Notice our employee fields is, of course, the named grades that we have. So we're simply using this indirect. So we're going to use this indirect formula, and I'm going to add it because it includes this dynamic database with the fields name, the name range we just created. We need to add that inside a formula. So we can do that right here. So B9, if error, we're going to use match. We're going to use the indirect of B4 and the database name and field. So we're adding that in here dynamically. Also the double quotes. So this is going to get our database column, database filter column. We'll call it filter or search column, filter or display column. We'll call it display column, because we're displaying, that's the column that we want displayed. Okay, great. So I also want to set some variables. I want to put some more information. It's going to help us a little bit later on. I want to know, this actually should be called the unique ID. Let me add that into our template, because this one is going to be called the unique ID column. I want to know that. So that's very important. And so that makes sure, because I have to add it to the template because all the other ones get deleted, right? So I want to make sure that it's added inside the template here. So adding that in here, I want to know what the unique ID is of that column. And that we're going to put, so I'm just going to copy and paste this just temporarily. And I'm going to put it right here, paste the formats here. So I want to know the unique ID column. So that's going to go inside B17. And then I want to know the database header row. What is the row of that? I want to put that inside B18. I want to know the first database column. What is that first column? I want to put that in B19. So I want to put these three values directly in here, B17, 18, and 19. So we can do that inside of VBA. B17 is going to take that unique ID. B18 is going to take on that header row. And B19 coming from our form. Remember, it's coming directly from our form. I think we put these into variables too. We didn't. Okay, so we could put those into variables, but that's okay. We're putting them directly where we need them, directly in that sheet. So we have that track of them. That's going to be very important moving forward a little bit later on. Okay, I also want to set the form row, set the initial form row to 21. What does that mean? Well, now what I want to do is I want to add all the information for our forms, right? So notice that our name, phone number, start date, those are all here. So basically what column associated with them, 2 through 13 here. If we take a look inside our customers, we see that we have 2 through 13. And I also want to know the type. What type is this? This is the text type. This is an amount field. This is a percentage field. So I need to track all those. Where did they come from? Well, if we remember correctly, they came directly from our form. So I want to extract the amount and I want to put them now inside our sheet right here. So I want to put them right in here. So we're going to run a loop. We're starting in row 21 and we're going all the way to last. So that's just going to keep track of those forms. And that's really going to help us. It's going to help us link those fields to our database as we create them. So we're going to do that. So we're setting that initial row to 21. And I'm setting the initial list column to 53. Why is that important? Well, if we take a look inside our employees database, remember we've got several lists. So we have 3 lists here. And our first list, what is that? Our column here is column 53. So if we have 3 lists, 53, 54, and 55. So those are the columns associated with our list. I need to keep track and I need to know where those lists are located. I know the first list is going to be on column 53, 54, and 55. So that's going to help. So I want to set the initial list to 53. Okay. All right, moving on. So now what we're going to do is we're going to loop through all of our columns, looping through all the columns in the database, and we're going to extract information. I want to put the information directly inside here. I want to put what database column, and I want to put what type of field it is. I want to store it down here because these 2 columns are going to be hidden. So we're simply going to loop through all the columns and add that information. So why don't we get that done now and see how it's done. Let's change this back to names where it makes a little more sense. Okay, so continue on. We're going to start for the column number equals from the first column to the last column. Those are going to be the database. If the column number equals the unique ID, then go to the next, right? I don't want to, the unique ID is not necessary. That's going to be hidden. So we really only want to start with the second or not the unique ID. Okay, so there's nothing to do because the unique ID is not going to be changed by the user. That's automated, so we don't want to touch that. All right, so inside column A and the form row, what do we want to put? I want to put that column number. Inside column B, I want to put whatever type. Where are we going to extract that type from? If we remember correctly, inside our user form, let's pull up our user form here. We're going to extract it directly from these drop-down fields, right? Text here. So if we look, we've given those specific names based on the column. So I want to extract this information, all this information here, and I want to put it directly inside the individual forms right here in B. So we're going to extract it from that form. So it's going to be from the form setup, from that form. We're looking for the controls. I'm looking for those combo box and the column number. That's why we give them very unique names. So we're going to extract whatever the value is that we're going to put it in B. Okay, so we're going to loop and all that. Then I also want to create a sample field, right? I want to duplicate that. I want to create this shape for every single, not for search, not for filter, but starting at name or phone or chart. I want to create that brand new. So how are we going to do that? Well, if we take a look also in this sheet here, we've got a sample. Here it is right here. All right, there it is, hidden all the way over there. So inside every sheet, because we've duplicated it from the sample, I'm going to take this shape called sample field. I'm going to duplicate it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to position it up here. So starting right under the filtered list, I want to position it right there. And we're going to give it the proper height and the proper width and all that. So we're simply duplicating this and then creating that based on the fields. So the first thing what we want to do is we want to take that sample field and we want to duplicate it and we want to give it a very unique name. I want to call it form field and I want to call it the form row. That's very important. Why is that? Because if we take a look at name, we see it's called form field 21. If I know this 21, I know it's associated with 21. I know the database column is 2 and I know that the type is text. So when I place this name here over here, how do I know what to format it is? Well, I know what to format it is if I place it right here, because I know it's going to be a text because all I need to do is look up here and I know it's text. And I know, how do I extract 21? Because I know I'm going to put 21 as the name. So now the next one is 22 and 23 and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's why we want to give it a very specific name based on the form row. That row is going to be located here. Remember, the row is 21, 22, and so on and so forth. All right, moving on. So now that we've duplicated it and given it a name, what I want to do is I want to give it some specific text. What is the text? Well, the text is going to be based on whatever the user has set. Back inside our form field, how do we know what the name is that we want? It's going to be based on this text box here. So if they changed it, I want to base it on whatever the user has decided to give the name here inside our field. So we're going to base it on that. So that, of course, comes from the form setup, controls, text, column number. So this is our field name, and I'm going to put it directly inside that brand new shape that we created, the text frame, text range, and text. So basically the text of that shape is going to take on whatever the user has decided. So that's why we have phone start date. So it's based on whatever the user has decided. It's defaulted directly from, of course, our headers here, but of course the user can then change it. Okay, so once we have that set up, we want to check for possible drop down list items. How do we know? Again, here, this is the point point where we're going to check. I want to check if there's some duplicates. I want to look for these, as we saw in employees. I want to look for some duplicates. And if there's duplicates found in the database, then I want to let the user decide whether we are going to be creating a drop-down list or not for that type of field. So in this case, let's take a look at our customer form. In this case, we had, I think, city, right? If we take a look in city, when we add city, if I know that it's a drop-down list, then I know to create that one. I think state we did. So state was a drop-down list we said yes on. So I want to make sure, now we can also edit the state, which is kind of handy. So it's there's a whole lot going on here. I want to be able to know it's a drop-down list. So how do we know that? Well, first of all, we're still looping through the columns. What I want to do is I want to determine the column quantity. That's what I mentioned to you, right? So if I'm looking in the customer's states, I want to know what is the quantity. So how many? I know that there's 21. So again, we're going to put that into a variable called column quantity. We're going to use the application worksheet function count A. We're going to use that header row plus 1, the first row value, all the way to the last row in the column number. So basically, this is going to count all the items in that specific column. So now we know how many are in there. But now what I want to do is I want to run an advanced filter. I want to get all the unique values. If they're all unique, then it's probably not the case that we want to create a drop-down list. However, if they're not all unique, there's a good chance the user might want to create a drop-down list. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to create that particular advanced filter. So in AZ1, I'm going to take the header, which is the header row, the column number, I'm going to put it into AZ1. So I'm going to take this header, whatever the header is for each of these columns, I'm going to put it directly inside AZ1, so right here. So in this case, it's contract, right? Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get unique rows, and I want to get all the unique in all these and have the results appear here, just like we did with name or anything like that. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to create that unique list based on that. So we can do that. What we're going to do, just in case there's any criteria, I'm not using any criteria. It's blank, meaning I only want the unique. No criteria. I just want unique values in that particular list. We've already placed the header in AZ1. So we're going to delete. If there's any criteria on this sheet, we're going to delete it. If there's not, it could create an error. Therefore, we're going to wrap it in on error, resume next, and on error go to 0. Okay, so now we're ready to create our advanced filter. So range, what is our first word? So our range is based on that header row and the column number as we loop through the columns. So we're going to do this for every single column. So our range is starting here, and it's going to go all the way to the last row of the column number. So this is a single column. We're looking for a single, right? Notice the column is the same. So we're running an advanced filter based on a single column. Here's the advanced filter. We're going to copy this to the new range. And what range are we going to copy it to? AZ1. That's where our header row is located. Remember, there's no criteria here. We're not filtering it by, I just want the unique value. Unique equals true. Very important. So what this is going to do is going to produce a list in column AZ. And what I want to do is I want to determine the last results row of that, right? So now if I know, let's say it brings me this list. It's got all the names here, and the last row is here. And I know that there's maybe, subtracting 1. If the last row is 15 and I subtract 1, then I know I've got 14 items in this list. If I look at 14 items and I know that inside here there's only, there's 21, I know that we have duplicates. So if we have duplicates, the user might want to create a named range. So to do that, we will ask them. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Now, if the column quantity, means the total quantity of items, is greater than the last results row minus 1, this is our filtered list, then I know that there's non-unique values, maybe there's some duplicates, possible drop-down list. So here, this is the point where we create a message box and we ask the user, do you want to create drop-down list? So we're going to do it just like this. If the message box, and then a space, and then what we're going to do is we're going to give it that name of the header. What is that name of the header? Is it city, is it state, or whatever? Has duplicate values. Would you like to make this field a drop-down list? If they say yes or no, or we're going to call this, the name is going to be possible drop-down list column. VB no, then go to no DD. So basically we're going to skip it and go all the way down here. So if they do say yes, we're going to do the following. This is all if they do decide yes. If it's no, they're going to skip right down here. So if they do decide, what are we going to do? We're going to set that header name, first of all. So the header name, where is it going to go to? It's going to go into that list column. Remember, our list column starts at 53. Every time we add a list, we're going to increment that list. So we know our first list is going to start at 53. So if I've said yes to 3 different ones, okay, in this case we only said yes to 1, which was the city. So it's going to start here. So it's going to take all those items, it's going to place it directly in here, and it's going to give it a name. So BA1 is our first list. So here, it's going to be our first list. So let's take a look at this inside here. So cells 1, we want it on row 1. List column starting at 53. What is the value? The value is going to be based on the database name, then the word list, then the column number. I want to know the column number, that original column number. So that's how we get something like customers. Notice it says customers, the database name, the word list, and 10. 10 is the column number that we have the states on. That's going to be helpful. So if we look down here and we see that states, we know that that's on column number 10. So if I do equals column, we see it's column number 10. So that way we know exactly what column number the list is located on. So we can extract that. So in this particular issue, we only put in one single drop-down list, which is the state. Okay, so we're going to create that. So now what we want to do is we want to add those unique items. Remember, we had the unique items in column AZ. We had them come down here. Now I just need to bring them over and place them directly inside here. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So the range 2 starting in row 2 and our list column is equal to the last results row in our list column. So this is where we want, this is our destination. Where are we grabbing it from? We're grabbing it from AZ, column AZ, AZ2, which is where our unique values came from. And this is the adding unique items. So we're taking our results, our unique results here, and we're simply placing them in whatever list column here. Then all we need to do is create a named range for this list. If we take a look inside here, formulas, name manager, and we go to, let's say, customer list here, customer lists, or customer list 10, I've created a named range. So notice that there's a named range for this list. It is that same named range that we're using inside our customer form, inside state. So if we go into data validation, it's the same list that we're using here. So I need to create that with VBA. VBA needs to create this unique list so that we can use that inside our form right here. Okay, so to do that, that's the next line of code. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a name. We should probably make sure we delete it. But when we're creating a brand new sheet, there's no chance that we're going to have a name like this. So we're just creating that new one. This workbook names, we're adding a brand new name. What's the name of the list? Name, list, and the column number. So this is the name you saw, customers list 10. So what's it going to refer to? Again, we're creating a formula based on that. We're going to use the offset formula. I'm going to use the database name just as we did before. I'm going to start it out in, we're going to start it out in the list column, that variable 53, 54, whatever it is, row 1, and I'm moving 1 row down, offsetting it 1 row down. I want to determine how many rows. It's the dynamic using offset, so that means as the list grows, so will this named range. That's why we can increase the named range as our list grows, because we're using offset. It's dynamic based on the number there. We're going to use count A based on the database name and the list column starting in 1 and then going all the way up to 9999, and we're going to count all the values there. And again, we're subtracting 1 because we've included row 1, so we're subtracting 1. This is going to create that dynamic named range for that specific list. Once we've created that dynamic named range, what I want to do is I want to set that form B1, I want to set it to drop down. I want to make sure that this gets changed to drop down. I want to know that it's a drop down. So that gets automatically changed to drop down right here. And this is the state. Okay, very good. So that gets, and then we're going to increment the list column. Remember, this is important, right? We've already occupied inside our database column 53. So the next one's going to be, if we add another list, the next one's going to be 54. So notice inside our employees, here, employees of 53, 54, 55. So we're keep increasing them because the employees have 3 different drop-down lists. All right, great. So that's how we check for possible drop-down lists and create drop-down lists based on just the unique items in a specific, from the database, in a specific list, creating that list from a database and creating a named range. Very, very nice trick there. Okay, great. So we've done that. So all we're going to do is we're going to increase the form row plus the form row, increment the drop-down list. So no, this is not. This is increment. Let me make sure. Increment the form row. Okay, so the form row. Okay, that's important. As we move through the form rows. Why is that important? Because our form row, where did it start off on? It started off on 21. So I need to go 22, 23, 24 as we go down through all the columns. So we want to make sure to increase that as we move down. Remember, our form row started out all the way up here at 421 here. right here, started at 21. So we're going to increment those. Okay, great. So we just keep looping through the columns, adding all that information, right? And then lastly, what I want to do is I want to run a macro that's going to reset our form shapes. And that is the next macro that we're going to go to. And that macro, of course, adds those shapes automatically here in customer. It's going to add these shapes accordingly. So every time I want to reset these shapes. Okay, great. So let's continue on. And we're going to focus on that macro called reset form shapes. So how do we know where that is? Well, that macro is, let's see, in one of the forms here, all we need to do is just right click and then just edit the definition. And that's going to take us directly to the drag and drop macros, So now we've created our form. So where are we now? We've created our form. We've created our shapes, but our shapes are all over the place right now. They're here, who knows where they are, right? So what I want to do is I want to put them in a nice order. What does it look like up until this point? Let's take a look what that might look like up until this point. So we're going to run a macro, and then I'm going to just comment that out. So we're going to pull that sheet form setup, right? And I'm going to just put a stop right here and see where we are. And I'll run through it one more time. So customer is not really created, so we'll recreate that. So again, it's going to clear everything out. So all I need to do again is just create that form very, very quick. Change this to probably document, click OK, and click OK. Okay, our macro is going to run. And it's going to say commission. No, we don't want commission. The state, yes, I do want duplicate state. Okay, it's stopped right there. And let's take a look inside. We have just 2 fields. And if we take a look here, I've actually got a bunch of fields right up in here. But they're all overlapping and you can't really see them. So here's all of our fields right here, here, and here, right? All we did is duplicate this sample field and create these different fields. So now what I need to do is I need to get all these shapes here, and I need to get them over in a nice order. I need to get them all down here. That is exactly what this macro reset frame. So if I continue on with that, that's exactly what happened. This macro is going to make them look very, very nice in a nice little order. So that's the macro we're going to go over right now. Okay, so closing this out, and we're going to focus on that reset. So we're going to look at the sheet form drag and drop macros. This one right here, reset form shapes. That's the macro I want to go on. So as we loop through it, so the best thing we want to do is just loop through here, find the last row, loop through here, and then create and shapes and position them according to this. But now we have this list. This is where we can pull it from. Okay, so that's exactly what we're going to do inside the macro. We're going to determine the field number is long, the last field row. We need to know that last field row. In this case, it's 32. So we're going to loop through those. The field row, as we loop through, that's the database column. I want to know that. The left position and the top position for those shapes, and the field range as range. Okay, so active sheet. And also another thing, when I loop through these, right, when I go through these, if the field's already been created, I don't want to add it to this list. So for example, if I decide we're going to add name, we're going to put it right up here. When I run through this list, I don't want to include name. Name's already included. Now, if I remove name here, and name's back up in here, then I do want it. It's so cool, I know. Okay, so I want to make sure that if that named range, but how do we know if it's existing? How do we know if it's already here? Well, what I've done is I've created a named range for this. I know there's a lot of training, right? So what I want to do is I want to look for this named range, customer form field 2. If I know that there's a name range called customer form field 2, then I know not to include it in this list. So we're simply going to check to see if it's been created, if that named range, this will be created. If it has not, included in this list. If it has, don't include it in this list. If only want to do this in edit mode, right? If we're turning off edit mode, I don't want everything off, okay? Edit mode is on, so we'll go over that in a little bit. So basically, we want to make sure that if edit mode is set to off, they can't do anything. And this provides security so that we can actually not have every single user change it. Of course, you'll assign passwords to this and all that. Well, okay, so if the edit mode back, how do we know if the edit mode back? This particular shape here is called edit mode back. If the text of this means off, like it is now, if the text of that is off, then I know it's in edit, not in edit mode, and we don't want the user to edit anything. So we're going to skip all that. If edit mode back, text frame, text equals off, then we're going to exit the sub, right? We don't want to do anything if it's not in edit mode. If it is, we're going to set the database name to whatever's in B2. Remember, we know that the database name is located here. And also, next up, we want to do the left position, setting that initial left position based on C1 and 4. So it's going to set based on column C and moving it a little bit over to the right. Okay, also the top position is going to be C2 in the top 10. We're just setting that initial top position C2 plus 10. So the top position is going to be up here, but I want to make sure that these particular fields, this one is called field type 1, this one's called field type 2, and this one's called field type 3. So I want to make sure these 3 are set first before I set everything else. So we're going to do those differently. So that's here, and then we'll move on to the other fields. So the field types, if the shapes, okay, so we already got that. So for the field number equals 1 to 3, there's only 3 specific: button set, search, and the filter field. So these 3 don't have anything to do with the data. They just have to do with the function of the form. The data is below that. So these 3 get treated differently. So if the field number equals 1 to 3, if the field number equals 1, and again, the REC button set visible equals true, then go to skip field, meaning I don't want to, if it's already visible, I don't want to show it. So again, let's take a look at this. This button, once we add this, what it's going to do is going to create, let me reset that form. Okay, so if this here, I've just dragged it over here. If this particular is visible, then I don't want to show it. See that? If I clear it, let's redo that again. If this button set is visible, I don't want to show it. It's already there, right? So I don't want to include it. Oops. When you I can't right click it. Click it once, then move it over, okay? So not right click. Right click, not going to do any good. Single click, just click on it. If it's visible, let's take a look at the shape name. This is called, let's let the macro run. This is called REC button set. If it's visible, then don't show it here. We don't need it. We don't want to use it to drag it over more than once. If they clear it, it's going to be visible. But if they don't, right? So that's basically, I want to know if it's visible, then don't show it. So if the REC button set is visible, then we can skip the field. We can go all the way down here to skip the field. Okay, we don't need that one. The same thing, if field number 2, the field number is 2, what is number 2? Our field number 2 is our search field. This is our search field. And so if this is 3, this is 2, and this is 1. So I just want to know basically if any one of these are visible already, don't add it in the list. And I like that because once you add it, it's gone from the list. So as we add these items, it becomes gone. So it's very, very simple for the user to keep dragging and dropping. So, but I want to make sure if they're visible. So if the field number equals 2 and B3 equals empty, what do I mean by B3? As soon as I add this search by, B3 is going to take on the cell. Notice that it says E6. That's where our search field is. This is blank. When I clear the form out, you'll see both B3 and B4 are cleared. So we know that we should include this in the list. As soon as I add search field, that's going to be part of the drag and drop. Okay, as soon as I add the search field here, we know that the search by B3 is going to be empty. So B3 is going to tell us if B3 does not equal empty, we know we've already added it. We can skip it. Same thing for B4. B4 is for the filter list. If I add that filter list, B4 takes on the cell that it gets added to. So we know it's been added. We don't want to include it. Again, we're skipping the field list. However, if it's not been skipped, we want to display it. So the field type and the field number, the left position, it's going to take on the top position. It's going to get a very specific height, a very specific width, and it's going to make it visible. So basically, all we're looking for, has it been added yet? As soon as it gets added to that, I don't want it to appear in this list. So that's all we're doing there. Okay, great. So that's all we've done there. The next up, what we want to do is I want to take this, the field type and the field number equals false. If we're skipping that, right? If we're skipping that, I want to make sure that it's not visible. We're skipping it, right? I want to make sure, what does that mean? And that means that, let's clear it out one more time. I don't want this visible. I don't want this visible, and I don't want this visible if they're already inside the form. So we're making those visible. Otherwise, remember, we're skipping the fields here, going to skip hide. Once we've displayed it, we're going to skip hide, and we're going to go down to here. Otherwise, we're going to hide it here. Hide form objects. If they have been added, they have been added. Okay, very good. So that's all we're going to do. Okay, so now we're ready to focus on all the rest of the fields, and those are the ones that are concerned with the form. So what I want to do is I want to display all these form fields, but I only want to display them if they have been added. So that means if I click on name and I add name, I don't want to include name in this list. How do we know that? Well, what I've done is I've given it a named range called customers underscore form field 2. So I'm going to look for this named range. If it exists, I'm going to hide that shape. If it doesn't exist, I'm going to show that shape. So the first thing we want to do is I want to determine the last field or row in column B. And because I'm going to have to loop through all of these. So we're going to use a large number. And I'm going to get the last row, in this case is 32. I'm going to loop from 21 through 32. So to do that, we're going to set that field row, the initial to 21, going all the way to last field row. I want to get that database column, and that's going to come from A. A, 2, 3, 4. This is our database column. I'm going to put that into a variable called database column. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set that field range. I'm looking for this. What am I looking for? I'm looking for something called customers underscore form field 2, right? So 2 or 3 or 4. So I'm going to look for that. If it's not found, it could create an error. Therefore, I've wrapped it in on error resume next and on error go to 0. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to look for it. If not, field range is nothing. What does that mean? The two negatives cancel each other out. That means it's found. The field range is found. If it's found, like this one, then what I want to do is I do not want to display name here. So we're going to skip displaying it. What we're going to do is we're going to skip it right here. So we're going to simply hide it. And then we're going to go to skip form field. It's going to go all the way down here. It's going to skip displaying it. Displaying it's here. So we're going to skip that. But what if it's not visible? Excuse me, what if we have not added it? We have not added. That range is nothing, right? We haven't created it yet. In that case, I do want to display it. So we're going to take that shapes, form field, and the field row. Going to set that left position, the top position, the height of that shape, the width of that shape, and we're going to make sure it's visible. And then what we want to do is we want to increment the top position, right? We don't want them overlapping. We want them to go down vertically here. So we're going to put a space between them, and we're going to use 25 pixels to increment that. Okay, we're going to set that field range to nothing. We're just going to simply loop through the field rows now that we've added them all. So it's simply going to look for them and then reset the form shapes. And then we're going to select, and that's very important. I want to make sure to select on the given shape. So we're just going to select actually F3, just going to select off that. So we're just simply selecting any other cell. Okay, so when I click on a field, I want something to happen. And what do I want to happen? Well, if we take a look inside our form template, we can take a look. That's okay. That means it's drag. There's already been a macro assigned to this. This is our sample shape. This is the one that gets duplicated. If I click on the edit macro down here, assign a macro, and now we see that it's been assigned to something called item select. If we edit that, that's going to take us also into our drag and drop, and it's going to click item select. So that means every time that we duplicate this shape, the macro also gets duplicated with them. So that's how automatically there's already macros assigned to these buttons automatically because our sample had it. And it is this macro right here. So basically what I want to do is I want to assign a bunch of information. When I click on something, I want to take the name of the field, form field 24, and I want to put it here. I want to put whatever text is inside that shape, and I want to put it here. I want to set the left position here, and I want to set the top position here, and I want to set the shape move to true. So what I want to do is turn off application screen updating. B12 is going to take on the name of the shape located here in application caller. B13 is going to take on whatever text is inside that shape using shape, application caller, text, text frame 2, text range, selected field. So that's going to take on that name. Next up, I want to set the left position of that shape, right? The left position, and also the top position in B14 and B15 respectively. I want to set B16 to false, right? That's going to set that to false, and that was false, right? And then what we want to do is I want to select that shape. And importantly, when I click on it, I want that shape clicked. So that way, when we move it over, it's automatically selected. So very important to select that shape. This will select the clicked shape. Turn on application screen item. And then what we're going to do is we're going to check for a move. This is the next macro that we're going to be going over right here. And basically what this macro is going to do is going to run a loop, and it's simply going to check to see if that shape has been moved. If it's been moved to a proper spot, it's going to then apply a field to that spot. And this is very similar to what we went over but in the last training, but there's some very sizable differences, and it's much more streamlined and optimized, so make sure you check it all out. Okay, so we'll go over the variables as we run through them, right? We're going to mention the found position as a range. The found position is going to be set as a range, so we need to make sure that we have that. That's the position that the shape is going to be found at. Okay, we're going to focus on that active shape. Now what I want to do is I want to determine the selected shape. Now that's going to be based on B12. If we take a look inside B12, we see that that's the shape number. That's the one we're going to be focused on. I need to know that's the one we've selected. We need to find the position of that. So that is going to be the first thing. That's going to set our selected shape. If for some reason there's nothing on that, we can exit the sub. This is the shape we're going to focus on, its position. Where's that top position? Where's that left position? I also want to put some information in. I want to get that field number. That field number is very important. So basically, I want to extract here. What are we extracting? That field number could be field type here. So it could be 3, or the field number could be let's take a look here. It could be 24. So we don't know. So what we want to do is notice that this says field. This one is field type because it's a different field type. So the button set here and the search field and the filter list are all field types, while the database items, the items or form items, are form field and form field this. But they both have 9 characters. And what do I mean by that? So this is a field type. 5 here, 4 here. So what I want to do is I want to remove the first 9 characters if it's a field type. If it's a field here, again, form field, also 9 characters. When I remove the first 9 characters, it's going to leave us with a number. That number is very important. All right, so let's continue on. So what I want to do is I want to set that field number, and I want to replace whatever is in B12. I want to replace the first 9 characters. The first left 9 characters, replacing them with nothing. What's that going to leave us? It's going to leave us with the field number or form field number. So we're going to get that field type. Where do we get that field type? It's located in B13. Remember, that's the commission. What is the field name? It's really a field name. Let's change that field name, right? That's the name of the field. And then what I want to do is I want to put that the left position, the old left position from B14, and the old top position here. So we've got the left position and the top position. Why is that important? Because if I move this, it's going to have a new top position. We know that that left position and the top position are very different. When I see that there's a difference there, I need to know that the user has moved it. So we're going to do that. So if we're going to run that count, I've made this larger because some of the users have said the smaller the count. Before it was 100,000, now it's 300,000. And the reason is that you give you a little more time, especially on those fast computers. Okay, so now what I want to do is as soon as B16 is true, we're going to end. And that's important because we don't want it to loop forever. As soon as the user has made a change, we're going to set B16 to true, and we're going to end this loop, right? We don't want that loop to continue forever. If the user has made a change, we want to make sure that we're ending it. So we're going to look, as soon as B16 comes true, we're going to end everything. We're going to set the top position. Now, this is its current top position based on the current top position of the shape. We're going to set that left position based on the current left position of the shape. So we compare the current left position, the current top position, with this and this. Okay. So continuing on. So now if the top position does not equal the current top position, does not equal the old top position, or the current left position does not equal the old left position, we know the shape is moved. But now what we want to do is we want to check to make sure. If the field number is 1, why is that important? Field number is only 1 right here. It doesn't matter. They can move this wherever they want. So I'll let them move. If they want to move it over here, I'll let them, okay? You know what I'm saying? It's fine. So that's fine because they can easily move it to a different position, right? It's not a big deal. But what we can't do is we can't have them move this field here. That we can't allow. So what we want to do is if it's field number 1, why is it field number 1? Let's clear that data. No. So clear that data. Yes. Okay. So this, remember, this field type, we've removed it, right? So we've got this. If I select here, we see that we've removed the 9 characters. We know that our field type is 1. We're going to allow them to move the button set wherever they want. So we don't need to check for the positioning. If the field number is 1 and we know it's the button step, we don't need to check for the location. We'll let them move it wherever they want. That's fine. Okay, but everything else we do want to make sure that we have to check. So if the top position is less than row 3, meaning it's higher than row 3. I'm not going to let them move the field up higher than this. If they try to move something higher than this, we're not going to let them. Or if the top position is greater than 40, I'm also not going to let them move it below row 40, right? I just think that that's enough. So if it's below row 40, I'm going to also say no, it's not the correct field. I also want to check the left position. If left position is less than column D, we're going to say no as well. So, or the left position, or E, I should say E, column E, we're going to say no. Or the left position is greater than column O. So we're just basically giving them a range, right? If it's beyond that range, we're saying you can't move it there. We're just giving, we want to make sure that they put it in this area here. And this, all this helps us do it. We're going to let the, please drag the shape onto the form field. We're going to run the macro to reset, and we're going to exit the sub. Okay, if they have moved it to a correct spot, then what I want to do is we're going to set B16 true. That's very important. Remember, that's going to stop this loop. We want that loop to stop. We want this to be the last time. Okay, so we're going to check for new data. Oh, this we don't need the database name because that was in the last training. No, it's different. So we know the database name is going to always agree, so we can get rid of that. The database name is going to be in B2. So we're going to set the database name. We're going to set the database worksheet. This is going to set up the worksheet. The database worksheet, we've already dimensioned as a worksheet right up here. So we know that it is a worksheet. And so once we set the worksheet, it's going to be based on this worksheet sheet's database. So we're setting that database worksheet. We need to make sure we communicate properly with the specific database worksheet. We're going to set selected shape visible equals false. We're going to hide that shape. That means if I've dragged name over here to put it right here, I want to then hide that name shape. I want to hide it. So that selected shape is going to be hitting hide the shape that is moved. We're going to check for the button set. If it's the button set, I want to also make sure that we hide the button. So with shapes, record button set that top position, set that left position to left, and then visible, right? So basically all we're doing is if the user has said, yeah, we've moved the button set, I'm going to set that button set wherever the user has moved that sample. So we're just setting that up. Okay, and then we're going to reset the form shapes. Remember, when we run the macro, that's not going to be included because we're checking the button set's already been added. And we're going to exit the sub. So this is all for the button set. We're going to set the label cell. The label cell is to the selected shape, top cell left address. What does that mean? That means if I drag something here, if I bring this here, I want to set the label cell. What's the label cell? If I drag that label, it's going to be H6. If I remove it, let's say I didn't do the right spot, I want to put it to the correct space. I'm going to put it right here. So that label cell is going to be here G6. So we're going to use that. This is the label cell. This is the field cell, label and field. Okay, so the label cell is going to be equal to the selected shape, the top left cell address. That's where we're going to set it at. So that means that shape, wherever we move that shape, the top left cell, wherever we move it, that's going to become the start date. So that's it. So we move it, that's going to become the start date right there. Okay, great. So that's going to be our label cell. What about the field cell? So now what I want to do is going to check for the field. What type of field? If it's a search field, we need to do something. If it is a filtered list, we need to do something else. If it's a search field, what's a search field? This field. If it's called search field, we want to do something else. Because when I add a search field, what do I want to do? Well, I want to do a few things. I want to put the label here called search by. I want to set this name for the second item in the list here. And I want to make sure we clear that out and give it these formats. Notice these formats are going to come directly from here. That default field, I'm going to set that format. That's if it's a search field. So we need to do that. So if the field type is search field, then what do we want to do? I want to make sure that it has not been added. Again, this we probably don't need anymore. We had that last year because look, there's no way they can add another search field. So I like that better. We can't add it again. But basically we're checking search field's been added, B3 is empty, right? So in the last training, we were able to add it again, but now we cannot add it. So it's much better. Remember, this is not a part 2 because you guys don't watch part 2s. So now message box search already exists, but we know that the search, they can only add it once. So I like this training better. We're going to reset the form shapes. Okay, we're going to set the field cell. Now, what's the field cell? I'm going to set the field cell to what we're going to call this cell the field. This is going to be our label cell. This is going to be our field cell. So it's going to be one row down with the same column. So our field cell is equal to the selected shape, the top cell address, plus our offset one row down, no columns to the left or right. That's our field cell. So the field cell is going to have a specific. If the label cell value does not equal empty or the label cell offset, what does that mean? The check for occupied. I just want to check to make sure they occupied cell. I want to make sure they haven't moved it. If they've decided to move it to somewhere here, we're going to say, hey, these cells are already occupied. They're not empty. Please move your search by to another. So we're just simply checking for occupied cells. And we're letting the user know that cell's already taken. Please move it to another space. We're going to reset and we're going to exit the sub. We want to make sure they're moving it to an actual available area. We're going to set B1 to true to set the search add to true. We're going to be adding that search. I want this to, when we're adding or updating, I want B1 to go to true. Okay, we're going to set the label cell going to be searched by, meaning I want to call this label, the value of the label is called search by, so that's good. Then we don't need the field cell, we're going to keep that empty. The default label, I'm going to copy that default label, right? I want to take this format, and that format's going to come directly from here in our default label called default label. And I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it directly inside here. Okay, next up, what we're going to do is we're going to paste that label formats, and then we want it center, meaning I don't want it left justified or right, I want it directly in the center. After that, what we're going to do is we want the default field copy, right? I want a field below it. This is called field, right? And I want to copy this, our default field, if we want to change this. And I want to then paste that right in here, paste those formats in here. So we're going to copy that and we're going to paste the formats in our drop-down list. And I also want to do it one row below it. So one, also the same one right here. This one also gets pasted here. So we're going to enter that here. So that also gets pasted. Okay, then I want to add a validation. Remember, we created a validation here, our names, our field names. And what's the name of that? It's based on the database name and the fields. So we're going to add a validation. We're going to list, and the formula is going to be what? The database name and the fields. We've already created this, the fields, so it's going to get automatically added to there. Okay, great. And now what about the value of that? The value of the field cell, we want to put it to the second column, not the first. I really don't want to put the first. I want to use the second column. So simply put, the value of that's going to be based on the database worksheet, the range, the database name, and the fields. So this is the fields here. I wanted to put the row, basically that row, through, that's the first one. And the last one is +1. So basically one row, one column to the right, one column to the right. So that means that on our fields, notice that in our database we have fields. This is called fields, right? I don't want to put the first one, I want to put the second one, one column to the right. Whatever's in that column on that header row, that's what I want to place directly inside our customer form right here. So we're going to put that default value right there based on that. Okay, great. So now what I want to do is I want to set that header criteria formula. How do we do that? So the database, so what that means is when I search by a name here, whatever the user searched by, I want to put. So notice this is E6, right? So inside our customers located in A1 here, A1, I want to put whatever. I want to put some formula here, E5. So that way they get searched by. So A1 is going to take on the formula of wherever it's located, E5. So that way, when they search by a certain name, if they search by phone or they search by something, I want to make sure that it's coming from E5 here. So that's very, very important here. So let's change that. So if I change that to phone number, it's going to change the phone number here. So I want to put in that formula. That formula is going to go inside AA1. So we're putting that directly inside AA1. And it's basically going to be the database name plus the underscore form. That's the name. Of course, that's the name of the sheet. The cell address. So it's going to set the cell address, set the header formula. As simply as that. That way, as the user changes it. Okay, next up, what do I want to do? Next up, B3 is going to set the search field. B3. What is that field cell offset? B3 is going to be equal. So I want to set, remember, I want to know which field is going to be searched for that. So I want to put that in B3. I want to know that E6, because when a user makes a change, I have to know what cell they're making a change to, and that is E6. So it's going to go right there. Okay, B1 is going to set to false, add it. Remember, we've already set this to true. We're going to add to false. We're going to reset the form shapes. Okay, so that's if it's a search field, but what about if they add a filtered list, right? If they add this filtered list, we need to do something else. And we're going to put that right below it. And so we need to update that as well. Okay, so we want to do a few things. I want to put the label, custom results. I want, again, use that data, same validation, all for our existing data, put it there. And I also want to put whatever cell they're going to be changed. I want to put that cell directly in B4, and that's only if it's our field particular search by. So here's what we do. So if it's a filtered list, if the field type equals filtered list, then we're going to do B4. If B4 does not equal empty, then the filtered list. This probably will never happen again, because in our last training, because as soon as we add it B4, so we know if B4 is not empty, it's been added already, but that's going to be fine. We're just going to let the user know the list already exists. We're going to reset. Okay, we're going to set B1 to true. I want to set that filter to true. We'll set it back to false. That just lets us know that we're working with it. Basically, the difference is when we make a change to here, we want something to happen. When we make a change to here, we want something to happen. If I want to search by phone number or name or something or anything like that, right? I don't want anything to happen here. Notice that we're going to load those names as soon as I make a change here. Only if B1 is false. If B1 is true, nothing's going to happen. As we're making changes to these, there's certain changes where I don't want this to load up. And that's because we're actually adding values here, VBA. So we don't want to set this to false to do that, to true when we're making changes like that. Okay, so we're going to set the field cell. This time the field cell is going to be label cell offset 1, meaning this is our label cell, this is our field cell. Offset 1 row down, no columns to the left or right. So our field cell is going to be E8. Okay, so our field cell is going to be based on the label cell, 1 row down and no columns to the left or right. This sets our field cell. Now again, I want to copy that label from our admin. We're going to paste those formats. This is basically just going to paste that label right here. And then the next up, I want to paste that cell here from our admin here. We've got our default field, and we're simply going to paste that directly inside here. And then we're going to add our data validation. So again, here we're going to set that label. I want to put a label, the database name, and the result. That way, customers' results is going to be there. And also what I want to do is I want to set that horizontal alignment in the center, just like we did with the previous one. I'm going to copy the default field. We're going to paste it inside our field cell. That's going to give it that white look. Then what we're going to do is we're going to add that same data validation, the database name and fields. We want that same data validation right here located in the field cell so that the user can display whatever they want based on that just by changing it. Okay, so continuing on. So now that we have that, I also want to set the field cell, right? We're going to set that initial value. What do I want? That initial value, I want to set it to name. So again, we're going to use that second column, just like we did before, and setting it to that second column. So that's all we do inside here, setting it to that second column right here. Okay, next up, you see we've got some conditional formatting. If we take a look here, you see they're all conditional formatting, but that's got to be dynamic. We don't know where the user is going to be dragging these results. So we need to make sure that after the user drags these filtered, we take the rows below and apply that conditional formatting. So the best way to do that is to simply take conditional formatting from somewhere else and then paste it down here. So I've put the conditional formatting directly inside here in A10 and B10, and I brought it down here. So we're going to do that. So from A10, we're going to copy that, and we're going to paste down those formats right here. So bringing it all the way from the field cell row +1, meaning the field cell row is here, +1. So starting here all the way down. And now what I've also done is pasted some formats. Now these are hidden formats. As we saw in the last training, if you missed it, don't worry. I'm going to explain everything right now. What I want to do is I want to have that ID. See, there's a 1 here and a 2 here. I want to have that ID show up here, but I want it to be hidden. So I've used a custom format. If I change it to general, you're going to see the 2 show up here. So what I do, if there's no formats here, I'm going to copy the formats from here and bring them to here. So I put the original format here when I copied over. So if we take a look in the format here, this is already set to a custom format. And we're going to use the 2 semicolons here. When I add those 2 semicolons here and copy them over, it is going to hide whatever. If they're numbers, 2 semicolons. If they're letters and numbers, you can use 3 semicolons. So that custom format to hide it is simply those 2 semicolons. Adding that is then going to hide it. The rest of it is the conditional formattings in this cell, which is going to be based on that highlighted row here, and then odd and even rows to do that. All right, so we won't get into but those are basically just relatively conditional formats. Okay, so we're going to paste in those formats to all the rows up to rows 100. I'm going to set that search field cell address into B4. I need to know B4 is going to be that search field address. Then what I want to do is I want to set B1. I want to turn that to false, and I'm going to reset those form shapes, resetting the form shapes. And what that's going to do is then reline up these shapes, and we're going to include it. It's going to exclude, of course, that filter. So now we only have the shapes that we're going to need. Okay, great. So that's for the filtered list. So we've covered the filtered list, we've covered the search field, we've covered the button set. So that's the first 3. Everything else is going to be based on those fields, right? So now we're setting those fields. We're going to set the field cell. So we've covered all correct. And now what we want to do is I want to update those fields. So after that, we set those up. Let's continue on with the code right here with field set. The field cell, we're going to set that. It's going to be based on the range, shape, top left cell address, offset, 0, 1. What does that mean? We've already set the label. We've already set. Now what I want to do is the cell to the right, I'm going to set that up as our field cell. The field cell, because the formats are going to be different. Maybe it's going to have a drop-down list. We don't know. So this is going to be the 1 to the right. 1 to the right, 1 column to the right. No rows above, no rows below, 1 column to the right. That's going to set our field cell. Again, I want to check to make sure there's a not positioning cell. If we've dragged it, if I decide to drag this over here, I need the user say, hey, the cell or adjacent cell is already taken. Please select another cell. So we know that that's the wrong position. So if the cell value does not equal empty, or the label cell value, 1 to the left does not equal empty, or 1 to the right, then we know that it's been occupied. So we're simply checking the adjacent cells to see if they're occupied. If they are, then we know to move it over to the next cell. Let the user know and reset those shapes. We're going to set that field label to whatever's in B13. B13 is our label, our address. I want to know the label. It's going to be based on address. That means if I select address or city, I know what the label is going to go here in the label cell because it's already located right here inside B13. So we're going to take, so the field label is going to be equal to the field label here. If the field label's empty, then reset, right? We need to make sure it's not empty. Okay, we're going to set that, we're going to copy that. We're going to paste it in the formats. We're going to paste that field label in there, pasting the formats in. Also, they'll copy the default field. So basically, we're pasting the formats for here and here, basing on the formats for here and here. Okay, we're basing them directly inside. All right, so after we do that, we are then going to then paste those formats in. I want to know the database column. I want to get that. How do I know the database column? Well, that's going to be located in A and the field number. A and the field number is going to take on that. Remember, we know the field number. How do we know the field number? We've already extracted it from the shape, and then we know. So we know the database column 7, 8, 9. That database column is important. We're going to need to put that inside a variable. Once we have that inside the variable, what I want to do is I want to give that field cell a very specific name. I want to give this cell a very specific name, let's say, and that name is going to be the database underscore form field and then the column, right? So that's all we're going to do. So the name is going to be the database underscore form field and the database column, setting that field name. The field type is going to be based on whatever's column B. Here's the field type: text, date, amount, percentage, or drop down. So that's going to be the type. Okay, so now we're going to use select case. What if it's a drop down? If the field type is a drop down, I need to set the field cell to the validation. Now the validation, how do we know what the validation is? Let's say we're adding customers and we're adding state. How do we know what that is? Well, if I add state, I know that the state is a drop down, right? So we're going to bring it over here and drop it in over here. But how do I know? If I check on the data validation here and go into advanced, we see, whoops, let's go ahead and data validation here and select on the correct data validation. And what I want to do is I know that that's customer list 10. How do I know it? Well, I know that the 10 is there and the rest is customer list. So we know the name because it's based already on the database column. We know the name. So it's based on that. So it's formula, it's the database name, it's the word list, and it's the database column. We've already set that list up. Okay, great. So that sets the data validation for that cell. Normally we need to delete it, but we don't need to delete it here because we're not actually, this is a brand new sheet. Okay, date. Now, of course, if we do delete it, we do need to delete that, right? If I do delete that, of course, I need to make sure that that data validation is removed from that. That's very important on the date. Okay, let's say I decide I want to move city over here. So I want to make sure that it does get deleted. Okay, but what if it's a date? If it's a date, we're going to use the date field in the number format, meaning in the admin, we've already decided what our date field format's going to be, and we've given this a name range called date. The same thing for amount, the same thing for number, and now the same thing for percentage. So we've given all those named ranges. So now all we need to do is simply apply those to the appropriate. We know this is going to be the date. So now all we need to do is the field cell, the number format is going to be whatever's the date, amount, number, or percentage. Relatively simple on that. We're just taking whatever we've decided to format in our admin and applying it to the field cell. And that's it. So we're going to reset the form shapes, and we're just simply going to loop through all the columns and just go loop through and just create that. And so that is the drag and drop. So we're just simply creating that, waiting for the user. If they've made the change, if they've moved that shape, we're going to apply that to the right, and we're going to turn on application screen updating. Okay, great. So that's all we have to do to simply add the information, add the addresses here, whatever we want, and it's going to apply that named range. Okay, so what is next? So what if we want to remove a field? As we saw, what if I want to remove? I don't like the way that I've placed it. I want to now remove these fields. All we need to do, again, is just now we've cleared our form very, very easily, and notice they get put back on here. Well, the first thing we need to do is, of course, display that X, right? We need to display that X because it is that little X. If we've moved it wrong, we need to know when to display this X, and that's going to be on selection change. Notice it only happens when we hover on specific cells. So how do we get that? It's going to be on selection change. Then, of course, we have a macro that's tied to that that's going to help us delete it. So first thing first is how do we display this X? And that's going to be on selection change. So when we go into our form, whichever one, right now our template, if we take a look inside our form template, all of the code is here. So when we duplicate this particular sheet, it gets duplicated automatically into the sheet here. That's automatically brought over. So the selection change, right? If the user selects more than one cell, we're going to go out of it. B1 true, then we're going to exit the sub, meaning it's edit. meaning they're not in edit mode anymore. So I want to make sure we hide all the information. So the delete field button, the add picture, the add document, the edit list, all of those things, all those little icons get hidden when a user makes a selection. So any selection. However, if they've made a selection, let's say city, I think it was a drop down list, right? So city here is, nope, state was. So state was, so I really don't like it there, but anyways. So state you see was this particular pencil, this is called edit list button. We also need to remove that. So I want to make sure that all those things are removed. So when we add something to the right list, I want to give the user the ability to add it. So we need to make sure that all these things are added on. Initially, we're always going to hide these items. All these little icons are going to be hidden. We're going to set, I want to know the database name in B2, right? I want to the database column I want to replace. Why do I want to do? I want to extract the database column on any cell selection. Active cell name. If there's any error at all, we'll go to no field. If the user has selected a field, I want to take that database column and put them into a variable. So how do we know it? It's going to be based on the database name underscore form field. That's the name of the active cell. Remember, the name of this cell is customers form field 9. So if I want to put that, if I want to extract that 9 into a variable, I need to remove everything else. And that's what we've done here. We put that database. Now the field row, how do I know the field row? It's going to be database column plus 19. That's right. If I know, I want to know, if I know that this is 9, I'm going to add 19 here. And we're going to get that. So I know that the city is directly placed right here, located here. So we see that there. So we're simply adding 19. So we know that 9 plus 19 is 27. So we know it's going to be 27 right here. So I can get that database column. It's going to be coming from 8 also. Okay, so that's how we do it. So we're going to continue on there. So concerning, so we want to set that field type. So let's show how we show that X. That's an important thing. On selection edit field edit mode, show the delete button. If the user makes a selection between E2 and Z99, and we want to make sure the edit mode back is on. What does that mean? That means that this button here has to be on. If it's off, I don't want to show any edit. Only if it's on do I want to display that X. So the back of that must say on, must say on. In string target name form, right? I'm looking for that. I want to make sure that the field contains the word form. That name must contain the word form. Notice form is here, so we want to make sure to contain it. Okay, so continuing on. I am then going to make sure to display that. Where do I want to display that? Focusing on that delete field button. The left position is going to be the target offset 1 column to the right, left plus there. So basically I want to place it just to the right, and I want to place it just on the target a little bit lower, a little bit higher there than the target top position. I want it just above it. And the reason is because some of these have drop-down lists like state, and I don't want it to overlap. And so if we take a look in state, we add state here. I want to make sure that they don't overlap. So I want to put that X a little bit higher than that. That's why we've moved it up. So when we subtract that, you see that subtract 5, it's going to move it higher and then visible. Okay, great. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing. We are going to now place it there. All right, continuing on. So that's how we get the X there, but how do we delete it? So let's continue on with the deleted. That is the macro that's now been assigned to that X, and that is the delete. So when I'm going to put in here, it's called remove field. Remove field. And so what will we be doing? Well, the first thing we want to do is with the active sheet. Remember, we're using active sheet because we don't know exactly which form sheet it'll be. So whatever form sheet they're on, we're going to clear. We're not just going to clear the values. We're going to clear everything, the formats, everything. Clear values and formatting on the active cell. Remember, that named range that we created, we also must delete that from the cell. Also, the cell to the left, that would be the field values, that label, we also need to clear that field too. Clear values and formatting from that. Also, what I want to do then is I want to return it back to the way it was. So how do we know that? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this default form background, this one here. It's just basically the blue background with no borders. I've given them a name range called form back. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to apply this to whatever fields are there. So we're going to apply that, and that basically it's going to clear it all out here in the customer form here. Let's go with customer form here. So I want to apply it to whatever this field and this field, applying that. So we're going to copy that. So the admin form back, we're going to copy it. We're going to paste that into the active cell and to the one to the left of that. That's going to paste that into the label and the field, clearing that out. And also that delete button, we're going to clear that out. So we're hiding that button. And then we're going to reset the form shapes. Let's take a quick look at a few other macros in this clearing the form, right? Remember when we cleared the form, Now, clear data and form, basically what we want to do that is clear all the formats, all the fields, and clearing everything that's in it. If we say yes, we want to clear it all out. And of course, I want to make sure those items are gone. So to do that, we're going to mention the form name as a name. I want to know the form name. Are you sure you want to delete this form? Giving that confirmation. Setting B1 to true. B1, remember when we're making any changes to either the filter or the search, we set B1 to true. We set it back to false in the end. I want to take a look. I want to set the database name. That's going to be in B2. We're setting that into that variable. We're going to remove all the picture shapes, any kind of a picture shape that's record picture, the record document. I'll get into that when we get into the documents, how we show the documents. Also, the record button set, that's the set. I want to hide that. That's this button set. I want to make sure that that button set is hidden. This one right here, I want to make sure that's hidden all the time. So to do that, then what I want to do is I want to clear all the fields from D3 to P99. I'm going to clear the contents, clearing of B3, B5, and B8. What are those? That is the search field, the record ID, and the selected record row. I want to clear all those out. So doing that. And then next up, what I want to do is I want to make sure that we're changing the interior color of D3, setting it all, returning everything back to the original colors of that. And then also I want to make sure that we are deleting all the named ranges in here. To do that, we're going to loop through all the named ranges. For each form name in this workbook's name, if there's any named range that contains the database and form field, I want to look for that. So we're looking for any named range that contains that, and we're going to delete it. We're going to loop through all that. Then we're going to reset the form shapes. Resetting that list of shapes here to the original list. And then all we're doing is setting B1 to false. That is it. That's all we have to do to clear the form. Okay, great. So we've been over reset form. We've been over clear form. We have covered edit mode. This is something we haven't covered yet, so let's cover that. Now, we did in the previous training, but let me go through. There's been some changes. I want to make sure that when we turn on edit mode, I want to hide all those shapes, or I want to show all those shapes concerning edit mode. We want to be able to make sure, and I also want to understand if we're going to be edit mode or not. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing is we are going to, with the active sheet, we're going to focus on the edit mode. I need to know, are we setting it to on or off? So if the current value of that text is off, that means we have to turn it on. If we turn it on, we're going to do this. If we turn it off, we're going to do this. So when we turn it on, we are going to set it to green color, that specific shape, that inside the shape, this button here. I'm going to set that to green, and we're going to increment it over to the left. I'll speed up a little bit now. And so we're going to set the text on, and we're going to set the move increment 1. 1 meaning we are going to move it, right? I want to move it to the right, so we're setting it on. If I'm moving it to the left, turning it off, I'm going to do subtract 1, meaning when I move it to the left, we need to increment it to the left. So if I select this, it moves to the left. And using a -1 as we move through that, we're going to turn off application screen updating. We're going to set, remember, we're setting the text to off and we're turning it to gray color. For each of the field shapes in the shapes, I want to, for all the ones that are set to field type is those first 3. For every single one, if it doesn't include form field, what we're going to do is we're going to set the edit mode back to off. Then the field shape, basically what I need to know is simply this for these columns. If it's on, do I show them? If it's off, I want to hide them. That's all we're doing. It's just simply hiding and showing shapes based on the value. So that's all that does. So we're just going to loop through all the shapes in the sheet. And basically, if it's off, we're simply hiding the shapes. If it's on, we're going to simply show the shapes. Then we're going to set the button move. We're just going to move the button 29 increments to the left or the right based on the move increment. Remember, if it's negative, we're moving to the left. If it's positive, we're moving to the right, turning on application screen up and resetting the form shape. That's all we have to do. Well, I went through quick over that, but it's basically it. Okay, I want to get into the form macros. That's going to be last. We'll cover these. This is the last one, and this is how we load it. So the first one is, let's go ahead and create this form, turn it on. Let's go ahead and create the form real quick, just so you can see a full form and how quickly we can create it. Once we just select here, selecting search field, we'll drag that over here. Selecting the filtered list here, we'll bring that right under. Adding a brand new name for our customers, we'll put that in G here. And then we'll put the phone number on the right side, located in J here. Start date will also, that's a smaller, we'll put that here. Email is a larger one. Drag that here. Credit limit, a little bit smaller one. That's going to be here. And the commission, also a smaller one, putting that here. Address, we'll add that's a little bit longer of a field. City, also bringing that down here. And then we'll add on state and zip here and here. Okay, good. So we've quickly created this form. We'll add the notes and we'll add a contract here because we may want to put this is going to be a document file here. Okay, we've created that form, and now what we do is I'm just going to double click on here. That's going to auto populate this list that's already here, saving our work. And now what do we want to do? What's the first macro? I want to load this list. When do I want to load this list? Well, basically I want to load all the names or whatever the user has put, and I want to base it on any filters. So that means if they use an SI, right, we want to again use only those that contain SI. So how are we going to do that? Well, that's going to be on worksheet change. If I make a change to E6, how do I know what field? It's going to be located here. So if I make a change to whatever's in B3, I want to load this list. So that's a change event. Let's go ahead and get into that. Okay, so if we're going to go in the form template, it's going to be the same worksheet change event. I'm looking for whatever. We're going to set the search field to B3, right? That's a search field. If it's empty, we're going to skip the search. But if a user makes a change, we're setting the filter by in B4. Remember, when we make changes to E6 or we make changes to E8, we want something to happen. If we make a change to E8, we want to list by whatever we're listing by. So we certainly want that kind of change as a change event. If we make a change here, so making a change to B3 or making a change to whatever's in here. So that's why we put those inside here. So we're setting those up, right? Both of them here. Filter by equal to B4, search by B3. So if the user makes a change to the search field and B1's false, remember when we're editing the form, we're changing it to true. Then what do we want to do? I want to make sure that we have a database. If we do, we're going to put that name into a variable. If the target value is empty, then what we're going to be doing is clearing the contents of AA2. What is AA2? Well, AA2 is our database. So if we're on customers, we're going to look at customers. AA2 is right here. We're going to clear that out. That means it's going to load all the names. I want the names and the ID right here. I want to place that right here. And then we're going to bring them over. Those are the results. And that means if on the customer form, I clear that out, that means also AA2 is going to be cleared out. And then all of them are going to load. However, again, if I put anything in here, I want to take the value of whatever I put in here, I want to wrap it in with the asterisk before and after, and that's going to be basically a filter by the text. So that way we're going to do it right here. So if it's empty, we're simply going to clear the contents of A2, else we're simply adding the wildcard before and after the target value. We're going to run the macro that's going to load the list. That macro is going to automatically load the list. Now, if we make a change by filter by here, filter by, which is in B4, filter by, making that change right here, we're also going to load the list. Now, filter by, we're going to notice that the filter by is automatically linked to here. So we see that this is linked to phone. We're going to place that in AD. So we know exactly what it is. And I'll show you what that is going to be on just a moment. So we want to load whatever's there inside that. So we're going to set it back to name here. So when we make a change to either one of these, we're going to load the same macro. So back in the form, if we make a change by filter by and B1 is nothing, then we're going to record load list. So it's the same macro that's going to run whether we loading the particular filter or whether we're doing the search. So let's go into this macro record load list, and that's in the forms here. Clicking here and the form macros, it's the first one, record load list. Focused on the active sheet. Of course, we need a database. If it's empty, we can exit. B9 means exit on no filter column row. We need to know what row. This is very important. Remember, name is row 2 here. ID is row 1. So we need that. Why is that important? Because I need to know what exactly value to place directly here, because this is going to change. If I list ID or phone number, this is going to change. So when I list the phone number, I want that phone number to list, right? So AD1 is going to change based on the column number. That column number is very important, column 3. Okay, so we need to make sure if B9 is empty, then we need to make sure that we're having that. Okay, continuing on. So making sure that we have values in that. I'm going to set the view column to what's in B9. Database name is going to be in B2. The header row in B18. First database column. Filter column in B4. Remember the column that I want to know the column. What does that mean? That's the column. If B4, right, the column is what? Column number 5, E. So I want to extract the column. And then column number, this is going to be the filter column, it's going to be 5. The filter row is going to be the row plus 1. What does that mean? That means here is the filter row, the first row. If I know our filter is B8, right, what's the row after that? It's 9. So I want to put that 9 in the filter row. So it's the row of this, which is 8, plus 1 is 9. So the filter row is going to be 9, the filter column. All right, we're going to clear the contents of B8, clear the selected row. That's very important. Why is that? Because B8 is the selected row. When we run that, B8 here is selected row. When I run it, I want to make sure we cleared out the selected. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear out any data. I want to clear out all this, right? We're going to make a brand new list, so we got to clear it, delete that all. Right? So we're going to clear it once we delete it all. That's important because I also want to start in column D, which is the number. So we're deleting everything in here because it's a brand new list. When we run that filter again, it's going to automatically load up. So clearing it out, so we're going to base it on the filter row and the filter column plus 1. That's going to be the same all the way through the filter column, minus one. That is because we want the IDs. Here's the column, and the IDs are located here but hidden. So we want to clear out column -1 plus the column and all the way down to row 999. So that's going to clear them all out. Okay, we're going to set that database worksheet to the database name, and then we're going to set the form worksheet to the active worksheet. So we can get both those worksheets in. Focus on the sheets. So with the database worksheet, we're going to set that last database row. We need to run an advanced filter based on the last row. If it's less than 4, we could probably get rid of that because we don't know what row. So it's probably less than the header row, which we should be. Yeah, let's do that. If that last data row is less than the header row plus one, then exit this up. That makes sense because we know if the header row is 3 and this is 3 plus 1, if it's less than 4, then we have no data. So that's better, header row. Okay, the last database column. What is the last database column? We've already going to determine that based on Z in the header row to the left. So it's going to get us the last column. Then what we want to do is we want to set the results. Here's what I was talking about here. AC1 right here. AC1, the ID is going to be that control key column and whatever the column they use as F and B9. So first one, AC1, is going to take on that first database column. We can probably set it to the unique column too as well if we define the unique column. Let's do that. I want to do that because I want that unique. So let's dimension the unique column up here. Unique ID column, that's important. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set that unique ID column right here. And that's located in B17, I believe. Unique ID equals dot range B17. Okay, because that's important because I want to know that unique column 17 dot value, and that's the unique ID column. Once I have that unique ID, I think it's B17, I'll double check that in a second. What I want is that's the column that I want to add that unique ID to. So inside here, inside our database, right down here, I want to add that value here. So range here, let's put that here, dot range, I want to add that. Okay, so the header row, and I want to put that in unique. So I'm going to put it right here, unique ID column. So what that's going to do is going to put that header, whatever that unique ID. So we noticed, right? So basically that unique ID is located right here. Here's the header row. It's column 1. So I want to take that customer ID and I want to put it directly right here. So that's what I want, that unique ID to show up here. Next thing is the name. It's variable based on whatever. So if we take a look inside our customer form, we see that our unique ID located right here is B17. Oops. So the unique ID is there as long. Okay, so it is B17, and that's exactly where we want it. And we're going to create that long variable for our unique ID. And so we're going to load that up. And that's super important. So as we run that, we already had this variable. See, I didn't see it. Okay, so many variables. All right, that's good, important. And now continuing on. All right, so we have that. It's going to load up our information as we have it, just the way we want it, because I want it to load that unique. It may not be the first column. Why did I change that? Because it might not be the first column. We let the user decide what column is a unique ID. So whatever the column it is, that's the header that I want to put right here. Next up, I want to put in AD1, whatever the user has entered inside here. So because it may have changed, so I want to make sure, whoops, wrong form. So whatever the user has entered here, so that's going to come from 9. So here we know it's column 2 here in customers is name. So it's going to take that name in the header row, column 2, and we're going to put it directly inside AD1. That's the next line of code right here. So AD1 is simply the cells, the header row, and the view column. That view column comes directly from B9. We've already set it up here. So that's going to give us that header. That's the dynamic header here. So cool. So we have that. Next up, we're ready to run our advanced filter based on the header row and the first database column all the way to the last database row and the last database column. Running our advanced filter, our criteria is going to be AA1 through AA2. Our criteria is right here. Our results are going to come from AAC1 to AD2. So our results AC1 through AD1, I should say. Unique equals true. Our results are going to come, the last results row, AC. And then if it's less than 2, we're going to exit the sub. Then all we need to do is bring over the values, bringing them over directly into all the results into the last range. So AC2. So where's it going to come in? It's going to come in, those results come in on our filter row, on our filter column. That's the first filter column -1. That's the first area. It's going to come all the way to the filter row -2, also the last results row, the filter column. So basically, all we're doing is taking these results here, and we're going to bring them directly over inside here. And of course, they're hidden in here. Okay, very good. So we've brought in all of the results, and that's all we need to do. Okay, what about when we want to save and update this? This is really cool because we've got mapping, but look, in our original training, there's no mapping here. How do we map these and save those changes? I want to make sure that those changes are automatically reflected to the record. So how do we do that? Well, that's because we got to make sure that we're mapping. We've got to know the rows. So we've got the database row, the record rows right here. And if it's a brand new one, we know that this is going to be blank. So that's going to differentiate. So if I want to add a new one, and I want to save that, it's going to save it automatically and create a brand new row for that. And so we can see that. Of course, it's not, we got to clear our filter so we can actually see that. And we see that Fred's been added here. So how do we know that? If we want to delete Fred, just click OK and Fred's deleted automatically. How do we do that? All right, so we're going to show you how that. So save and update, that is the macro tied to that button, focusing on the active sheet. We want to make sure the database has a name. If no name, we can exit. Putting that into a variable, extracting that unique ID column, the header row, the first database column, putting all those into variables. Setting that database worksheet up to the database name. If B6 is empty, we know it's a new record. B6 is going to tell us new record. If it's an add new, B6 is going to be empty. If it's an existing one, B6 is going to be full. So if it's a new record, what I want to do, I want to determine the database row is going to be the first available row inside our database. B5 is going to take B7. That means that next record ID is going to go into B5. That max formula is located in B7. Then what we want to do is we want to set the next record ID. This is where the unique column comes in. I need to know what column to place it in. I know the row, it's that first available row. I know the unique column. That's what it's going to take on the next. It's in column 1 for us, but it may not be for you. So we want to make sure that unique ID should always be numbers, right? Unique ID. It's going to always make sure that it's going to go into the correct column. What if it's an existing record? All we need to do is extract the database row from B6. Then all we need to do is run a loop from 21 to the last field row. How do we know that last field row? Well, that last field row is going to be based on here. Set it up right here. Well, we better write that in right now. Okay, the last field row still works because it remembered it, is equal to what? We're already on the accuracy dot range. A, we'll use a large number, 150. Dot end XLUP dot row. Okay, the last field row. It still remembered it from the other macros that it's running. Okay, but it's important to do it again. Okay, so we're going to run to the last field row. What's that going to do? It's going to run all the way, determine the last field row. In this case, it's 32. So it's going to go from 21 to 32. It's going to notice the column. We know the column. So how do we know? So we're going to pull it. So I'll show you how. So 21 to the last field row. The database column is simply extracting from A and the database row. Now what I want to do is I want to update that database sheet. I want to update the database row and the database column value. But what am I going to update it with? I'm going to update it with based on the name. Now, if I know this is customer form field 9, right? I know that it's 9. All I need to do is add this plus the 9, and then I've got our named range. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. The range is simply the database name underscore form field in the database column. When I combine all this, I know the exact cell that we're going to be changing. So the value of customer form field 10 or the value of customer form field 12, whatever the value of this is going to go directly inside the database into that row, inside this database, inside the database row and the database column. So this is another way to map data. Remember, we're using the named ranges to help us map. See here, this is column 8. We know the column because it's part of it. Previously, we'd always put the columns off, right? That's the old way of doing things. I figured out a much better way. Create named ranges. Now, obviously, if you're creating a form, you got a lot of, but if VBA can create named ranges for these, we can use the column inside our named range to map map our columns inside our database here. So that's a new trick for this. Okay, so then we're going to run the list again, and we're just going to give a message box saying the message has been saved. Okay, if it's a new record, relatively simple. All we're going to do is deleting all shapes and clearing them out. And then we're going to exit on no database. We're going to put that into a variable, setting the database name. Again, we're going to run a loop just like we did. We're clearing out the ID, clearing out some information, making sure that we have the last filled row. Here's our database name. We want the last filled row. Here's the same one, except we're using a different number here. Whoops, we're using a different number here, so we can use a larger one, 150. Okay, again, we're going to loop through this. This time, we're going to set the database row also on that. And now, again, this time we're using the same exact range, except we're not adding the value. We're simply clearing the contents. So this is how we run a loop, and we clear the contents of every single form based on that, every single field based on the named range. So we're using the named range very, very well. Okay, loading the record, relatively simple. So when we're going to determine the picture name and the field range as a range in case we need to add those. If there's any pictures that have been added or any records that have been added, we're going to delete those. So if I see here's a contract, right? If I want to add a picture, I'm going to add a contract here. So we can do that. Here's a PDF. So we can add a PDF here. It's going to add us the PDF shape. I don't like the shape too much. I'll set this up. I think I'll update it to a vertical. Okay, so we got the PDF, so I want to make sure if a PDF gets created, if a document gets created, it's going to be called record doc. If a picture gets created, like in our pic, it's going to be called record pic. So either record pic or record doc. When we're loading, we need to clear those out. So record pic or record doc. If they're found in the sheet, we're going to delete them all. We're just going to loop through all that, right? B2, if we don't have a database or a row, we're going to exit. If the database name, we're going to set that to whatever's in B2, setting the database worksheet up. The last field row, again, we're determining the last field row. The last field row is less than 21. We're going to exit this up. We're going to, again, run from 21, extracting that database column just like we did in column A. We're going to set the field range. This time, what we want to do is reverse. We're going to make sure that we have the field range. Again, the database name, the form field database. This is going to set that field range. Here we're using a range. If the field range is nothing, we're going to skip the field. Why is this important? Because if I haven't added all the fields, I need to make sure that there's actually a named range that exists. If it doesn't exist, we're going to skip. We're not going to load details from that field. So if that field doesn't exist, we're skipping it. If it does exist, the value of that field is simply the database row and the database column, loading it in from the database. Also, if it's a picture, what if it's a picture? How do we know it's a picture? Because B in the field is going to tell us it's going to picture. If it's a picture, what do I want to do? I want to select on this file and I want to load the picture up. So if it's a picture, we're going to select that field and we're simply going to run a macro to show that picture. If it's a document based on B. So let's take a look inside the customers. We have a customer form. We have a document. If it's a document, I want to show it. So if I save this, click customer save, and then I go into a different one and it's going to hide. But if I go back into it, I want to show that document nicely. So you see the document showed. So what we're going to be doing is I'm looking down here. If I find document here and I find it here, then I'm going to display that document. So if B equals document, then we're going to select that specific cell. VBA is going to select that cell. Then we're going to run a macro. This macro will show the document based on whatever the selected file path is. So we know that file path is going to contain the document. The macro will show it. Same thing for the employees, except it's a picture. Here's the file path for the picture. We're going to select it. The macro is going to run. That's going to show. We're running way over time today, so I'm moving a little bit fast. Okay, then we're just going to select the search field, selecting something else. Deleting the record, very, very simple. All we're going to do is we're going to check to make sure we have a database or we have a row. We're going to delete that row from the database. And then also we're going to then delete any record pictures or any other pictures, record documents or pictures, and then we're going to add new and then list. Okay, so that's it for the form fields. Let's take a quick look at the pictures and then we're done. So we have picture and document macros. Browse for picture, we're simply browsing for a picture. This is kind of standard browsing, just making sure we set the filters to only pictures. We're showing the picture. Showing the picture is going to be based on the form field. So we're going to set that database column. We're going to extract that database column from the field. Meaning, if it's a picture, I'm going to extract 11. I want to extract 11 from that and put that into a variable called database column. Assuming it's in numeric, we're going to exit the sub, right, if it's not numeric. Okay, so then what I want to do is if there's any existing pictures, I want to delete them. I'm going to set that, remember, that's why we selected that cell, because that picture path is going to be in whatever the active cell value. So it's very important to select that cell because we're going to extract whatever that cell address, cell file path and put it in here. If the picture path is empty, we can exit the sub. We're going to put it onto the right, meaning I don't want this to bleed over. I want it right justified. And then if the picture path, as long as it's empty, we're going to insert the picture path. We're going to give it a very specific name and a very unique name using that column. We're going to display it using the locking the aspect ratio, and then basically just displaying it to the right of the active cell, giving it a width of 70 or a height of 50. That's it. With the documents, we're going to do very something similar, except this time there's no filters. We can put any kind of document in there. So no filters. We can upload any file. And then also we're going to take that whole document file path and we're going to put it directly in the active cell. Then we're going to run the macro to show document. Show document, our last macro today. We are simply going to do the exact same thing as we did on the pictures. The only thing the difference is the documents can handle both pictures and documents. So what we want to do is we want to extract that file type from the path. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get that file type. I'm going to basically look for the period, the last period, whatever's after that. For example, .png, .jpg, whatever, .pdf, whatever it is, I'm going to put that into a file type. If that file type is PNG, JPEG, or any of the pictures, we're going to insert the picture path. Obviously, we could run the macro that inserts that as well. Otherwise, it's a document like Word, Excel, PDF, or whatever the case. It's a document. We're going to insert that as an object based on the document path. We're going to link it true. Why is that important to link it true? Because if I want to add it, let's say the customer form here, if I want to open this, I just double click it and it's going to open here, right here. So here it is right here, bookkeeping. This is one of the things that we go over in my freelancer course. I hope you pick it up. This is bookkeeping applications. We went over this a lot. And so I've got lots of great attachments inside my freelance course. I hope you pick it up. That is the Freelancer Academy Masterclass. I'll include the links down below. An incredible brand new course. I worked really hard on that. I think it's going to really help your career. So if you're still with me after this long training, go ahead and check that out. All right, so then all we need to do is treat them the same. Whether it's a picture or whether it is a document, we're going to treat it exactly the same. We're simply going to do exactly the same as we did for the picture, giving it a very specific width and height, and then locking it up. All right, this has been one incredible training. My voice is almost gone after more than 2 hours. So we learned today, what did we learn? We learned that we can take a database, any type of database. We can right click, we can add, we create an incredible form. We can customize it any way we want to. We can quickly create forms simply using drag and drop, no code in order to create the form. Of course, in order to create the application, lots of code, but no code to create the form. Whether we're creating a customer form, we can show documents, we can show pictures, we can create really cool filters any way we want. We can show display, all with simple drag and drop. I hope you have, and of course there's unlimited per database. I hope you have liked this. If you do, I would love if you could just join us on Patreon. I've got so much more and I'd love to hear your ideas and thoughts. What should I add to this? Join me on Patreon. I'm there. I've got brand new training, every single updates and lots of things going on there. Thanks so much and we'll see you next time.